Chapter 2568. Crystal Fortress. As Han Sun glanced around, he thought the buildings in this place looked exactly like a crystallizer control room. Li Qier commented on it, saying, "The style of architecture must mean this place belonged to the crystallizers." Exquisite nodded and said, "This should indeed be a crystallizer structure. The genes of the crystallizers didn't evolve much, but their technological prowess was exceptional. They ended up challenging the real demons, which were rank 13. But if they had gone for a lower rank high race somewhere in the top 100, they would have become a high race through their technological power." Li Qier was interested, and so she said, "I have heard the crystallizers almost beat the real demons, and they only lost because of the Extreme King's interference. Is that true?" Exquisite shook her head. "I don't know about that, but according to the records of our race, after the lamp was turned off, another race joined the fight. That race wasn't the Extreme King, though." "What race was it then?" Han Sun couldn't help ask. Exquisite didn't mind answering, and so she casually said, "I don't know. It was an army composed of people from all sorts of different races. They never explained where they were from." Poor crystallizers. Despite their shortcomings, they strove so hard to overcome the challenges of the universe. They did so by crafting technology, because it was what they had at their disposal. Reaching the heights that they did through technology alone couldn't have been an easy accomplishment. Li Qier sighed with dismay. While they were talking, they followed the two crocodile gods into the crystallizer fortress. The stuff there had been badly damaged. There were broken buildings and machines strewn about, but they didn't see any remains of the fortress's former inhabitants. The whole fortress was composed of buildings and machines. The big crocodile god continued to lead them through the ruined fortress, though it gave them no indication of where they were going. It's pretty obvious by now that this place once belonged to the crystallizers, but only kings can enter the core area. How would they have been able to get here from the outside universe? Even if they somehow managed that feat, how would they get through the sea of lava to the core of this planet? Li Qier asked, looking around. Crystallizers could do things that other races can't. It's hard to say anything about the crystallizers, because their technology opened a wide range of possibilities. Their technology could have brought them here safely, even though such a trip would have been impossible for others. But what were they thinking by building a fortress here? Exquisite looked around and thought aloud. Han Sun was also examining the fortress as they walked. This place was similar to the crystallizer control room. He had once been inside. Crystallizer technology was everywhere, but he didn't know how to make use of their gear. It's a shame that Stay Up Late isn't here. If he was, he might be able to say a thing or two about this place, Han Sun thought. Suddenly, Han Sun was given a shock. Deep within the fortress, they came upon a large area that looked like a warehouse. Inside that place, there were many crystal canisters. They were lined up like a row of pillars that were 100 meters tall. Most of the cylinders in the front seemed to be shattered. There were only 2 or 3 that were still whole, and inside them, there were chain demon crocodiles. They were not crocodile gods. They looked like the big ones on the planet's surface that were dark red. Those chain demon crocodiles with bat wings were soaking inside the crystal test tubes that were full of fluids. They looked like dead bodies submerged in tanks of formaldehyde in a laboratory. Exquisite and Li Qier noticed those tubes and stared at them. They approached them and saw that there were many more crystal canisters. There were a few dozen rows of them. Each row had 15 canisters. Most of the canisters were broken. There were less than 10 that were in an okay condition, and each of those had a chain demon crocodile occupant. Weird. The crystallizers came all the way here to capture the chain demon crocodiles? Li Qier was confused. "This isn't right," Exquisite suddenly said. "What isn't right?" Li Qier looked at Exquisite as she asked. "Based on how these canisters are lined up and the location of each chain demon crocodile, the other canisters should have held chain demon crocodiles too. But they aren't here, and their dead bodies aren't here either," Exquisite said. "Maybe they ran away?" Li Qier said. Exquisite shook her head. "That isn't important. Each canister has a king-class chain demon crocodile inside it. If each canister contained one of these, think about how many chain demon crocodiles there were in total. I'm afraid the whole population of chain demon crocodiles doesn't equal the number that could be stored here. Li Qiu hadn't considered that. Maybe the other canisters weren't intended to hold demon crocodiles. But regardless of what they held, there should still be bodies lying around outside the broken containers, Li Qiu said. Exquisite didn't object to her line of thinking this time. The good canisters were randomly positioned amongst the broken canisters. There didn't appear to be any order. Perhaps it wasn't an accident that there were king-class demon crocodiles inside the canisters. Maybe there had been demon crocodiles inside the broken ones before. But if they were all king demon crocodiles, that didn't seem to make sense with what they knew of the current crocodile population. It really was hard to believe. The three of them followed the crocodile gods around the area. They eventually saw a semicircular crystallizer building ahead of them. It was made of transparent crystal, but their view inside was still obscured. They couldn't see what was on the interior of the building. The crocodile god walked into the building, which was around the size of a stadium. Han Sun and the others had no choice but to follow them inside. After they entered, the three of them were shocked. They could see that this place had a swimming pool. There was also a man-made beach, which made it look like an ocean. Scattered across the place were many benches. The big crocodile god climbed atop a sunbathing chair with its belly facing outwards. It relaxed as it enjoyed the seashore like a gangster boss. All it needed was a shirt and a pair of shorts. The small crocodile god ran across the sand, and then it ran back. Its mouth now held a rope, and it was hauling a box toward them. Han Sun watched the small crocodile god drag the box in front of them. Then it rumbled at them. Li Qiu knew what the little crocodile god meant. She opened the box and saw many tools inside. She suddenly had a bad feeling about this. Although the three of them had never seen crystallizer tools before, they were certain that was what filled the box. They did not know what the tools did, though. But judging from their shape, it was possible to imagine them as tools for construction work. As the small crocodile god rumbled and Li Qiu explained, Han Sun quickly realized the bad feelings were coming true. The crocodiles intended to use the three of them as workers. The crocodile god wanted to use them as slaves, so they could repair and clean up the space fortress. After understanding what the small crocodile god meant, Exquisite and Li Qiu looked terrible. They had never done anything like this for the very high. Now two crocodiles were treating them as mates. It made them feel so ill that they wanted to pass out. Chapter 2569. Clown Tattoo. Han Sun picked up the tools and headed toward the swimming pool. He didn't mind working. By doing this, he'd be able to walk around the whole fortress, which might give him the opportunity to find something. Right now, he was quite curious about the nature of the location he had ended up in. Exquisite and Li Qiu were aware of what Han Sun wanted, so they reluctantly picked up their tools and went with him. But before they exited the immediate area, the small crocodile god stopped them. It lifted a clawed hand to point at the rubbish scattered across the beach. It wanted them to clean up the beach area first. Han Sun exited the swimming pool with the toolbox in hand. The crocodile god didn't follow him. He wasn't in a rush to clean, so he took the chance to walk around the fortress while he was able to. The fortress was in poor condition. Most of the machinery had been destroyed in whatever cataclysmic event had ended the life of this place. Even when he saw a machine that wasn't broken, Han Sun had no clue what all the gadgets and gizmos were supposed to do anyway. Strangely though, aside from the demon crocodiles in the canisters, he hadn't seen any other bodies. He couldn't even find any long-forgotten bones. Judging from the way the buildings and equipment is all broken, this place must have come under fire from a hail of meteors. But why can I not see what rained down on the place? As Han Sun continued to think about the problem, he went back to the plaza with the crystal canisters. He had settled on investigating that place first. The demon crocodiles there exhibited no semblance of a life force. Inside those broken canisters there was nothing. There were no bodies. And whatever liquid they might once have contained had all dried up, not leaving a single drop of the stuff behind. 1 inch weird. Does that mean the crystal canisters themselves were empty? Han Sun frowned and kept walking forward. Han Sun looked at all the crystal canisters. They all looked the same, and he didn't think there was anything amiss. Suddenly, Han Sun stopped before one shattered crystal canister in particular. Beneath that shattered crystal canister he found something. Under the shattered crystal, he found a man's hand. It looked very big, and its skin was rather dark. The most important thing about it, though, was that it was in perfect shape. It showed no signs of decomposition. Han Sen would have taken it for a living man's hand if he hadn't felt that there was no life force coming from it. Han Sen was so excited about making this discovery. He moved the shattered crystal to reveal more of the hand. Han Sen found that it was actually a whole arm. There was no body attached to it though. The arm had been severed around the shoulder. The arm was very muscular. Judging from its length, the person who had that arm had to have been 2 meters tall. He would have been a very powerful man. On the side of the arm, near the bicep, there was a tattoo. The art depicted a clown, and it was dark red. The tattoo clown appeared to be jumping. Its legs were spread as if it had just taken a mighty leap. The clown's face was facing forward, and there were 2 horns on its hat. Its eyes were small, and it was smiling. Han Sen didn't find the tattoo amusing. The clown was strange, and its smile made Han Sen feel very uncomfortable. Han Sen set the arm back down, and went back to cleaning the shattered bits of crystal. He was hoping to find the body that the arm had come from. He wanted to find out who the man might have been. The broken chunks of crystal were heavier than steel, but to Han Sen, they were nothing. He quickly managed to brush all the broken crystals aside. However, oddly enough, he didn't find any evidence of a body underneath the destroyed crystal canister. In fact, there wasn't even a blood splatter. Han Sen used his purple-eye butterfly to check the area out. He didn't know if the rest of the body had never been there, or if it had simply degraded over time, but aside from the arm, there were no leftover substances of anything else. Was this arm chopped off elsewhere, then brought here at a later date? Han Sen glanced around. The fortress was like a big city, so searching through all of it would be a difficult task. Han Sen planned to widen his search, but when he turned around to pick up the broken arm, he was given a shock. The broken arm had been perfectly preserved when Han Sen first found it. But after he spent 10 minutes cleaning up the broken crystals, it was totally rotten. Only its bones remained. The dark skin and strong muscles had become a pile of reeking gloop. Han Sen was used to seeing dead bodies. He wasn't disgusted by the sight like many people would have been, but he did feel strange. This arm was fine all these years. Why did it suddenly rot just now? Han Sen inspected the rotted arm, staring at it. Only the bones remained now, but he discovered something very special about them. The clown symbol on the skin hadn't disappeared. It was still branded onto the bones of the arm. It still had the same creepy little smile, and the clown was still positioned in mid-step. The dissolving flesh had revealed other markings as well. The skin had only shown the tattoo of a clown, but the bones were covered in other symbols. Crystallizer text? Han Sen was as shocked as he was happy. He looked at the words, which were written in a tiny crowded script. Without his purple-eye butterfly, he would probably have needed a high-tech microscope to examine what the text said. Han Sen had learned the language of the crystallizers from Stay Up Late, so he knew what the words meant. Even as he examined the text, he still thought it was weird that someone had carved words into their bones. Plus, the arm had been perfect. How had someone carved directly on the bone without harming the surrounding skin and muscles? Han Sen picked up the bones from the pile of gloop. He cleaned away the mess that had accumulated, so that he could get a better look at them. The bones were pale, and he couldn't detect any semblance of a life force. But he could tell that the clown symbol and the text had been etched in by a machine. It was engraved, not branded. What is going on here? How could someone use a machine to write words onto their bones? Did someone write this after the person died? Han Sen thought to himself, as he tried reading the text. M67 test subject had abnormal changes. Test results are unknown. Number 7586 core creation of a god failed. Han Sen read it out. It seemed like some sort of report log. Han Sen didn't know what M67 meant. Judging from the contents, though, it appeared that the crystallizers had been trying to create a god, and something happened to the test subject. Then the tests concluded, and there were some numbers Han Sen did not understand the relevance of. They were associated with the data on how M67 had mutated. He didn't know why all of this was written on the bones of the arm. Were these people crazy, This data and information could have been stored on a crystallizer flash drive. Why carve it into bone? There had to be a reason for them doing this. Han Sen stared at the text on the bone in consternation. As Han Sen was thinking about this, he heard a low roar from the small crocodile god. It swung its tail in annoyance as it approached him. It growled again, as if it was hurrying him. It didn't like the fact that Han Sen was sitting there doing nothing. Chapter 2570. Crystal Furnace. Han Sen thought for a while. He brought a few pieces of fruit out of Destiny's tower to give to the crocodile god. This little crocodile god is just a baby. It should be an easy thing to please. All I need to do is keep it happy, then I can do anything I want. I wonder if it is a vegetarian. I don't have much meat stockpiled at the moment. Ever since Han Sen started collecting King Xenogenic genes, he hadn't been eating anything else. The fruit was something he had saved for Bauer, but ever since Bauer had found that purple ginseng, she hadn't shown interest in anything else. No other type of fruit enticed her. So Han Sen had been keeping them inside Destiny's tower the whole time. If someone wanted their body to evolve, the process would take a lot more than just practicing various genoarts. The higher class a person was, the more energy their body would require. And the food they consumed had to be of greater quality. That was the only way to deliver the extra needed energy. Every creature in the universe had to eat. The only differences were in how and what they ate. High-class elites could go without food for a long time, but the price they paid for that was the consumption of their energy. If that went on for a long time, their bodies would be damaged quite severely. When people said they didn't need to eat while practicing, it was a load of rubbish. In real life, you would die if you didn't eat. The starvation process just took a little longer for strong people than for the weak. This didn't just apply to warriors with ordinary levels of power. In Han Sen's experience, even guys that called themselves God had to eat too. But instead of eating flesh, they ate the lifespan of the people that came to them to make wishes. The little crocodile god had to eat too. But it didn't show any interest in the fruit Han Sen had given it. It used its tail to sweep all the pieces of fruit away. It looks like it doesn't eat fruit or veggies. In that case, what kind of food does it eat? Han Sen tried to guess, but he had no meat to share. Then again, Han Sen doubted that the creature wanted to eat meat either. If it had, Han Sen, liqueur, and exquisite would have already become crocodile chow. The little god crocodile growled at Han Senator. This was the second time, and it was clearly rushing Han Sen to get to work. And so he did, clearing the shattered crystals all around him. The little crocodile god had assumed the role of the inspector. It commanded Han Sen to do things, like throwing the shattered crystals out of the fortress and into the lava sea that was held at bay outside. Han Sen wasn't in a rush, and neither was he annoyed. He just stuck to his tasks of sweeping and cleaning up, hoping to find something useful as he went. The small god crocodile was pleased with Han Sen's work ethic. The little crocodile god seemed born to be a supervisor, and it seemed very pleased to be doing this sort of work. But Han Sen failed to find anything interesting as he went. And when the little god crocodile eventually grew bored, it brought Han Sen back to the swimming pool with it. When Han Sen arrived back at the swimming pool, he found liqueur and exquisite giving the big crocodile god a head massage. They were using a brush to scrub its body too. Liqueur and exquisite looked like a perfect picture of misery. They had never dreamed of being forced to do something this demeaning. They had been taught that as members of the very high, their futures held incredible potential. They had dreamed of doing many things, but never of working as a crocodile's maids. Especially with someone like Dollar around to see their humiliation. The big crocodile god was a harsh taskmaster, but liqueur and exquisite were eventually allowed a break. Did you find anything around here? Exquisite asked Han Sen, as the two of them approached. Just more shattered crystal. There doesn't seem to be a single thing of interest otherwise. Han Sen had already stuffed the arm bones into his Destiny's tower. He didn't plan on informing the girls about his discovery. What about you two? Han Sen asked. What could we find? All we've been doing is sweeping up crap all day. I have no idea how these two eat so much. They piss wherever they like too, Liqueur said, her expression morose. Han Sen's heart leaped. He quickly asked, Can you tell me what they've been eating? How the hell should I know what they eat? Their dung is like firm orbs. It looks just like the materials that make up the planet itself, Li Kier said. In that case, maybe they are eating material that comes from the planet, Han Sun said after a moment of thought. What is the point of knowing what they eat? Li Kier asked. It would let us rest easy in the knowledge that they don't want to eat us, at least. If that's the case, we are quite lucky, Han Sun said with a shrug of his shoulders. If I'm going to be trapped in here for the rest of my life, I think I would rather die. Li Kier didn't agree with Han Sun's line of thinking. We aren't carrying much food ourselves. We need to find a way to get out of here, Exquisite said. Do you know a way out of here? Han Sun asked. Not right now. Exquisite shook her head. Then there's no point in talking about it, Han Sun said gloomily. The three of them rested for a while. The little crocodile god soon came over, hurrying them back to work. Out of the three, Han Sun had the best chance of working outside the pool area. The two girls were worse off, as they were stuck serving the crocodile god on the beach. They swept up crap, or massaged the crocodile's scales. They were just like maids. It was likely that the crocodiles were the only beings in the universe using two of the very high as maids. But God only knew how long they would enjoy this service. Han Sun was outside, setting toppled pieces of equipment upright, or cleaning up devices that had been completely destroyed. In the beginning, the little crocodile god was really interested in ordering him around. But after a while, it became too lazy and stopped. Once he was free of his miniature overlord, Han Sun could walk around the fortress. While looking through a random plaza, he finally found something. Crystal was a technological product. It wasn't normally used to create things like tablets, but in that plaza, Han Sun found a crystal wall with text on it. Because the crystal wall was broken, it took Han Sun almost 3 days to collect all of the fragments and piece the wall back together. Then he was able to read the text in full. Crystal Furnace Skill. This seems to be a geno-art, but the name is very weird. I wonder what it does. Han Sun began reading through the content a little more closely. After all, the geno-arts of the crystallizers were usually quite suitable for humans to practice. But Han Sun wasn't very hopeful for the potential of a crystallizer geno-art, because the crystallizers weren't very famous for their geno-arts. Their skills were rarely exceptional, but after Han Sun read about the crystal furnace, he was given a fright. This wasn't exactly a geno-art. It was a godly skill for people who love to eat. The crystal furnace was a way to reinforce one's stomach. It was different from consume, which focused on the ability to digest food. By contrast, the crystal furnace turned one's stomach into a nuclear reactor. It quickly released the energy of food, and the energy release would be immediately absorbed. The waste would come out quickly. No wonder the crystallizers have such a reputation for research and development. Even their geno-arts are scientific. Han Sun loved it. He wouldn't turn down a new geno-art that aided his digestion. But when Han Sun reached the end of the text for Crystal Furnace, he saw an additional note. The public version of Crystal Furnace is only suitable for kids below 16. For those who are above 16, please practice Crystal Core Reactor. This is the kids' version? Han Sun was annoyed by that, but he couldn't find the adult version of Crystal Furnace, so he had to learn the kids' version first. Chapter 2571. Crystal Furnace Database. Han Sun memorized the Crystal Furnace skill. Then he broke the crystal wall back down and tossed the remains into the burning sea. Although the crocodile god hadn't clamped down on his freedom to explore, Han Sun knew that a being of such power would be to control the whole fortress. If Han Sun did something bad, like opening his core area hall, he would be immediately stopped. So, Han Sun didn't make any reckless escape attempts. Instead, he did legitimate work, shoveling and cleaning things up properly. He cleaned like a man who had come from a long line of noble janitors. The crystallizers were a race that focused on technology. Unfortunately, it meant there were few leads for Han Sun to follow up on. There were many tools available, but Han Sun didn't know how to make use of any of them. Most of the machines were probably too broken to be repaired anyway. As he continued to fail to find anything useful, Han Sun became less and less enthused with cleaning. He tried bringing out many items to attract the attention of the little crocodile god, But the creature wasn't interested in any of the things he offered to it. Clearly, Han Sen had no idea what it fancied. Exquisite and Li Qiu kept trying to escape, but all their attempts failed. They were in more of a rush to get out of there than Han Sen was. However, every time they tried to run, the crocodile god's control of gravity pulled them back. They were unable to teleport away, either. One day, as Han Sen was cleaning up a fallen room, he found a table. What is this? The table and the room's equipment were all broken. The table was cut in half, and all 4 of the table's legs were broken. But there was a drawer under the table that hadn't been damaged. Due to the fact that the table had been broken, the drawer had popped open. After quickly rummaging through it, Han Sen found a box. The box was made of wood, which was rare to see in a crystallizer's territory. Han Sen opened the lid and found a pair of glasses inside. The glasses sort of looked like sunglasses. They looked really cool, and the glass itself was dark like charcoal. They didn't look see-through at all. What is this rare and strange item? Were these glasses intended for a blind man? Han Sen murmured as he fiddled with the item. There was nothing weird about them, and so he simply put them on. The moment Han Sen put them on, the pitch-black glasses grew transparent like crystal. No, they were more transparent than crystal. When Han Sen looked out through the glasses, he couldn't even see the glass that was resting across his own face. And as this happened, lots of data began to scroll across the screen of the glasses. The data whizzed by in a blur, and Han Sen soon heard a voice. It seemed to be coming from the glasses, but it played directly in Han Sen's ears. System scanning. Genes confirmed. Crystallizer identity confirmed. Crystal furnace data opened. Han Sen suspected that this was a high-tech piece of equipment, since it could scan one's genes. When the voice grew quiet though, Han Sen couldn't feel anything different. The lights and numbers on the glasses had disappeared. Aside from that initial procedure, nothing seemed to be happening. Hey, are you still there? Han Sen asked the glasses. Please don't ask dumb questions. The crystal furnace carries intelligence and sense. Please align yourself with intelligence to avoid sending the crystal furnace unnecessary messages. It is a waste of energy. Han Sen heard the voice directly in his head, and he suppressed a sigh. A pair of glasses didn't like him. So, Han Sen said one word, but then he decided to be quiet. He spent a moment thinking about what he should say first. He ended up telling the glasses, "Your name is Crystal Furnace, right? What functions can you perform?" "My full name is ZXD27 Crystal Furnace Database. I am in charge of feeding juveniles." The voice of the glasses played in Han Sen's ears again. "ZX what? I am just going to call you Glasses. And what did you say about feeding juveniles?" Han Sen asked. "I am designed to aid babies in growing up healthily," Glasses answered. "Be specific. What can you do for babies?" Han Sen asked after a second. "The main services I provide are collecting a person's data and analyzing it with the Crystal Furnace database." That explanation didn't really help Han Senator clearly. Glasses wasn't that smart. Glasses seemed to be able to sense what Han Sen was thinking. It said, ZXD27 Crystal Furnace Database is the greatest piece of crystallizer technology. It has an intelligence growth system. The starting intelligence level is that of a 5-year-old crystallizer child. "That's pretty good," Han Sen complimented Glasses. But he was still unable to figure out what it did. As Han Sen tried to think of a way to ask Glasses more about its purpose, he saw Exquisite approaching from the swimming pool. Han Sen's heart jumped. He used his mind and spoke to Glasses. "Let's be more pragmatic. Do you have a see-through function that allows you to see through walls, or maybe clothes?" Han Sen remembered that pairs of glasses in fiction often had that function. He had his Dongxian aura, but he couldn't use it to see through clothes. If Glasses had that function, then maybe the device wasn't too shabby. Voyeurism goes against crystallizer law, Article 16221. Violations can result in prison sentences of 5 to 10 years. ZXD27 is an AI for children, and so it does not allow that function. A professional worker allowance card is required to enable that function on your Crystal Furnace database. Are the crystallizers such good people? After mulling that over, Han Sen sighed. "Then what is it that you do? Show me," Han Sen said finally. Please select a target, the pair of glasses said. I want her, Han-sun said as he directed his gaze at Exquisite, who was coming over. Symbols and data suddenly ran across Glass's screen. The view of Exquisite zoomed in slightly, like a camera was focusing on her. The crosshairs locked on tight as Glasses started its analysis. The glasses didn't release any light or anything, so Han-sun didn't know how Glasses was performing its analysis. Collecting data, analyzing data. Exquisite was already in front of him by now, and the device was continuing to scroll through data. This thing is so slow. It's as laggy as a dying computer, Han-sun thought to himself. Why are you wearing black glasses that you can't see through? Are you pretending to be a blind man? Exquisite said, peering at Han-sun's face. Yeah, I'm just messing around, Han-sun said casually. But he was actually thinking. It looks like I'm the only person who can see through the glasses. If other people look at the glasses, all they see is black. This is quite smart. At this time, the voice in the glasses spoke in Han-sun's head again. Scanning was successful. The data has been successfully analyzed. Han-sun observed the image of Exquisite, and the data being displayed on Glass's screen. There was a report too. Target, very high female. Han-sun looked at the first few words in front of him in stunned silence. Chapter 2572. Gene Potential. Are you mistaken? Isn't she one of the sky? Why does it say she is one of the very high? Han-sun asked Glasses in his mind. He was trying to keep his surprise under wraps while he read through the rest of the report. Target, very high female. Gene age calculation, 23 years, gene level, 9th tier king, gene potential, 5 stars. Crystal Furnace database has a lot of gene data concerning the very high. Based on the target's genes, her genes match the very high profile at a rate of 87,675%. The genes that associate her with the sky compose 0.3% of her form. Likelihood of target being a member of the very high is 99%, Glasses answered. Han-sun believed it. He already knew that Exquisite was 9th tier king, which proved that Glasses wasn't talking nonsense. Right. I never heard about Liqueur and Exquisite in Sky Palace, because they don't belong to the sky, Han-sun surmised. Then what does their gene potential mean? What is the highest star rating achievable? Han-sun asked. The gene potential means how much a creature can grow. According to the Crystal Furnace database, there are 10 stars in total, Glasses answered. No way. There are 10 stars in total, and a member of the very high only has 5? Han-sun was very suspicious about these results due to the fact that the very high were one of the strongest races in the entire universe. Even if their genes weren't the best, they shouldn't have been as low as 5 stars. What are you doing waiting around here? Exquisite asked with a frown. Han-sun was just standing there staring at her. It's nothing. I was just thinking of a way to get out of here, Han-sun said. So did you think of a way? Exquisite asked. No. Han-sun shook his head. Then let's just wait for rescue. We have been missing for a while. Our people will probably think of a way to save us, Exquisite said. Then she left. Han-sun opened his mouth. He wanted to ask if she was one of the very high, but if she was choosing not to divulge that information herself, there had to be a reason. He knew that very well, considering that he didn't go around telling everyone that he was a human. With that in mind, he decided not to ask. For a king, 5 stars is top class. Only deified start at 6 stars for analysis, Glasses answered. I see. How many stars do I have? Han-sun asked out of curiosity. Collecting data. Analyzing data. Analyzing. Glasses' data collection started going through the motions, except this time it was taking far longer. Genes are unstable. Cannot confirm. Cannot confirm. The data collection kept going on, and it didn't seem as if it was going to stop. It doesn't matter, I suppose. There is no need to continue testing, Han-sun said. Glasses had continued to say cannot confirm, which Han-sun found annoying. Glasses quieted down, and the data on the screen vanished. Right, let's go and see how the big and little crocodile gods rank on this thing, Han-sun thought. His heart already beating a little faster, Han-sun headed for the swimming pool. Han Sun saw the big crocodile god still asleep on the sunbathing chair, with Li Qiu massaging its head. Curiosity rose in Han Sun, and he found himself wanting to test out Li Qiu first. The results were similar to exquisites, and it turned out that Li Qiu was one of the very high too. She also had 5 stars, but she was younger. According to the crystallizer's gene calculations, Li Qiu was only 16. This time, I believe you. Han Sun turned and looked at the big crocodile god. He saw the icons spinning as the device collected data, but after a while passed, it hadn't come up with any results. There's no way you cannot analyze that. Han Sun started to doubt whether or not the glasses were working properly, but then he saw the image and data of the crocodile god appear. Target: Gravity Crocodile God Female. Gene age calculation 1. 365 billion years. Gene level. Transmutation deified gene potential. 7 star. Your analysis is so inaccurate. A deified of the transmutation rank only has a potential of 7 stars? Han Sun was doubting the analysis glasses was providing again. Gravity Crocodile God's genes are only 4 stars. There is a limit to the rank that it can achieve. It cannot become fully deified because, even after modification, its gene potential will only rise to 7 stars. It can never exceed the rank of transmutation. If there are no gene mutations, the chance of reaching larva class is 1 in billion. Seriously? You have that much deified data to compare with? Han Sun asked skeptically. This is the result after comparisons with the samples of other deified creatures. According to the database, without a 9-star potential, a deified creature can never become a true god, Glasses answered. Han Sun looked at the little crocodile god with much suspicion. Glasses worked again, and the data symbols started to spin. After a while, Han Sun was finally able to read the results. Target: Gravity Crocodile God Male. Gene age calculation: 1 month 7 days. Gene level: Primitive deified gene potential. 9 stars. Holy shit. This guy is a gravity crocodile god. Why does it have 9 stars? Han Sun asked. This gravity crocodile god was born deified. Its genes mutated, becoming far better than the old ones. According to the genes shared, they must be mother and son. Seriously? This small thing has the potential to become a true god? Han Sun looked at the small crocodile god with a fire in his eyes. The little crocodile god realized Han Sun was staring at it. So it looked at Han Sun with disdain. But Exquisite was still scrubbing the creature's scales, so it didn't do anything. A 9-star deified xenogeneic can become a true god, but it isn't guaranteed, Glasses answered. Han Sun ignored Glasses as he tried to think of a way to kidnap the small crocodile god. That thing could one day become a true god. But Han Sun remembered that he couldn't take a core xenogeneic away from there. So kidnapping would be pointless. After considering the results delivered by Glasses, Han Sun decided to place his faith in them. If the crystallizers had designed this device by themselves, they wouldn't have been able to gather so much data on deified creatures. But the elders of the crystallizers helped Sacred Leader analyze the story of genes. And they eventually took over the sanctuaries. Han Sun believed they must have received some data from Sacred. For someone like Sacred Leader, it wouldn't have been too difficult to collect data on deified beings. Back then, the very high and ancient god were far below Sacred. The extreme king were servants of Sacred. If Sacred Leader wanted their gene data, it would have been very easy for him to collect it. After all, gathering gene data didn't require the deaths of the deifieds. It would only require a hair, or a small sample of DNA. If Sacred Leader wanted a strand of hair, who would dare to turn down his request? Now, Han Sun just wanted to go home and try it out on his baby daughter Linger. He wanted to see how much gene potential she had. But as long as he was under the control of the big and little crocodile gods, he couldn't go anywhere. Leaving wasn't an option just yet. Han Sun was going to remain patient and keep cleaning up the fortress in case there was anything else there for him to find. Glasses only scanned, analyzed, and compared. It didn't do anything else. Chapter 2573. Analysis result. Han Sun searched for a few more days, but he didn't find any goodies. However, in that time, Han Sun's crystal furnace reached beginner level. After all, It was a geno art for crystallizer children. It wasn't very difficult to come to grips with. And having crystal blood made it even easier to learn. Humans were the offspring of crystallizers, so crystallizer geno arts were quite compatible with human physiology. It only took Han-sun a few days to learn the geno art, and he produced some good results to boot. Now, Han-sun was able to eat 20 to 30 king xenogeneic genes a day, and that was just at the beginner level of Crystal Furnace. If Consume, Big Destroyed, and Crystal Furnace all reached peak performance, he calculated that he could eat at least 110 xenogeneic genes a day. Crystal Furnace isn't bad. I need to teach it to Bauer and Linger too. When Han-sun thought about his baby daughters, it felt as if he took an arrow to the heart. But escaping the fortress wouldn't be easy. In the past, he would have tried to escape using his super god body. Because Wanner was in his Destiny's Tower, however, he couldn't use his super god body for very long. Making his escape would take longer than he could maintain his invincible form. Han-sun sat down and rested. He brought out one of his alliance beverages and had a couple of sips. But after he did, the little crocodile god ran over to him and stared at the bottle of wine. It seemed very curious. Han-sun raised an eyebrow. He pulled out a cup and poured some wine for the small crocodile god. This time, the little crocodile didn't smack the cup away with its tail. It rolled out its tongue and tentatively approached the cup. Han-sun was so happy. At first he thought that the little crocodile enjoyed drinking. But instead, the crocodile god used its tongue to lift the cup and splash itself with the contents. Its scales were very high in temperature. The creature had tried to lower the heat of its scales, but when the wine touched its body, the liquid flashed into steam. The small crocodile god looked unsatisfied, so it used its tongue to snatch the entire bottle of wine this time. It appended the bottle over itself. As he watched the wonderful wine boil away, Han-sun's heart ached. It was a bottle of the wine that Ji Yinran had prepared for him. It was a century old, and it could no longer be purchased anywhere. It was a very rare item, but the small crocodile god seemed to really enjoy it, and its body reeked of alcohol. The little crocodile god made an inquisitive rumbling noise as Han-sun mourned the loss of his wine. It turned out that the crocodile wanted more. "I don't have any more wine. If you want, I can go back and get you some more," Han-sun offered to the small crocodile god. The little creature nodded and gave a low roar, as if it was hurrying Han-sun to go and fetch the wine. "You will let me go back? If that's true, then I will leave." Han-sun didn't really believe that the creature would let him go so easily. If people left the core area, they would return to the same spot that they had left. Unless they never entered the core area again, they'd be trapped. But Han-sun was different. Because he had 4 self-cogwheels, he could show up in 4 different locations. He didn't need to return to this location. If he could leave, he would be set free. The small crocodile god hurried him to leave and bring back wine. So Han-sun generated the power to open the door to the core hall. He said to the small crocodile god, "I really am going." The core hall's door was open, and the small crocodile god made no effort to stop him. And neither did the big crocodile god. For all intents and purposes, he had permission to leave. Han-sun was so happy. He hadn't thought that he would ever be able to leave that place so easily. So he quickly hurried through the hall's door. The small crocodile god made no effort to stop him, and so Han-sun successfully managed to leave the core area. He returned to the safety of the white whale. His exit was so smooth that he could barely believe it. "Dad, you were gone for so long. Next time you go on such a long trip, can you take me with you?" Bauer jumped into Han-sun's arms. "You can't go to that place." Han-sun smiled. Han-sun couldn't take people or creatures there, and even if he could, he wouldn't dare do it. If a child entered the core area, they would have to be king class. And that meant people, upon seeing a small child enter, would go crazy. Seeing Bauer smile, Han-sun's heart felt warm. He used glasses to analyze Bauer's genes. Han-sun didn't want to find out how much potential Bauer had. He wanted to know what Bauer's race was. Bauer's race had always been a mystery, so maybe the glasses could help to resolve it once and for all. The data scan of the glasses kept scrolling. A while went by, and the analysis cycled on and on. It gave Han-sun a bad feeling. Lack of data. Cannot analyze. Cannot analyze. When Han Sun heard those words, he was disappointed. But no matter what race Bauer was, Han Sun didn't care. As far as he was concerned, she was his genuine daughter. Han Sun was going to let Glasses stop, but then he heard a voice. Analysis complete. The genes are unstable. Gene level cannot be confirmed. Gene potential cannot be confirmed. You are her parent. Shit. This thing really is for kids. It isn't reliable, Han Sun thought in annoyance. After half a day of waiting, that was the result he got. Han Sun used Glasses to look at everyone on the white whale. Aside from Elysian Moon and Gu Qingsheng, who came from the sanctuaries, the others were analyzed in great detail, and with an impressive amount of accuracy. Elysian Moon and Gu Qingsheng had the same results as Han Senator. Their genes were unstable, and they couldn't be analyzed. Han Sun tried using Glasses to analyze the little red bird. He didn't have much hope for success, but he was presented with something interesting. Target: Phoenix, 51%, and Fishbird, 49%, female gene class. Original deified gene potential, 10 stars. There were many detailed pieces of information being analyzed. And it all shocked Han Senator. He hadn't expected the little red bird's blood to be that powerful. Its 10-star gene potential practically guaranteed that it would become a true god. His gene blood is that strong? Han Sun curiously asked Glasses. Glasses answered, Phoenixes and Fishbirds are true gods. It has the blood of both, and while its growth speed might be slow, there is a high chance it can become a true god. Its chances of failure are practically zero, but it will require a lot of materials to become a true god. It has a higher chance than a creature that is born purely a phoenix or a fishbird. After Han Sun heard this, he closed his eyes in exhaustion for a long moment. He had been growing the little red bird all this time, and upon hearing this, he now knew he would have to gather a lot more resources for the bird in the future. Han Sun looked at the others in the white whale, and assumed that the information on them was accurate. Then he looked at Wanner, who was asleep in Destiny's tower. Glasses had to run longer for her than it did for the little red bird, but only one word was presented as a result: sacred. There was nothing more than that. It analyzed the race, but the only result was a name. There were no details or other content. Chapter 2574. Alcoholic Han Sun returned to his home in the Alliance. He wanted to test Glasses on his daughter Han Linger, and see how much potential she had. Soon after trying, though, he was forced to acknowledge that you could never tell how much potential a human had. It would always say the genes of a human were unstable and unable to be determined. The creatures could have their potential and blood calculated, though. The results were promising, and some of them had a 5-star gene potential. Because they hadn't reached deified class, though, 5 stars were the highest their potentials could go. After becoming deified, their gene potentials could be tested again, and thus the tests at that time would be more accurate. It was like there was a distinction between those who were deified and those who weren't. No wonder the elites didn't want me before. Now it makes sense. Are the genes of humans really that unstable? Han Sun wondered. Daddy, hug hug. Linger was able to talk pretty well. She reached out her pale little hands as she ran to Han Sr. My little baby, let Daddy kiss you. Han Sun lifted Linger and kissed her on the cheeks. When he wasn't trapped, Han Sun came back every day to rest. He had been trapped inside the core area for many days, though, and so he hadn't seen his family. Linger was a good kid, and she didn't cry much. The family did a good job of protecting her, as well. After she was born, she hadn't used her super god spirit again. That came as a relief to Han Senator's small kids, and too much power was a bad combination. Linger hadn't yet learned how strong her powers were, and so she hadn't yet learned how to harness them. If her mood spiraled out of control, it would be a dangerous and frightening thing. Luckily, Linger had a very calm personality, and the family was able to take care of her. So nothing had gone wrong in his time away. Han Sun hoped Linger would be able to grow up like an ordinary child. He wanted her to have a normal childhood. The last thing he wanted was for her to reach the complexities of adulthood too soon. He rested at home for the night. The next day, he gathered a few cases of wine and took it to the core area. Now that the small crocodile god had allowed him to leave, That meant it was likely he would be able to leave again in the future. Han Sen wasn't in a rush to get out of there anyway. He wanted to spend more time digging and see what else there was to find in the fortress. Han Sen returned to the core area. When he arrived, the little crocodile god ran frantically over to Han's senator. It roared at him repeatedly, its tone strange and wandering. Perhaps the crocodile was complaining about him being too slow. I was looking for that wine for you. I needed some time, as this stuff is very precious. Han Sen opened a barrel of wine, allowing the intoxicating fragrance to suffuse the area. The small crocodile's eyes brightened. It stopped whining at Han Sen and jumped straight into the barrel of wine. Huge plumes of steam came from the wine barrel, and a second later, the wine was all dry. The small crocodile god jumped out. Before Han Sen could open up the next barrel, the crocodile god was already jumping inside. Han Sen soon realized that the crocodile god didn't want to use the wine for drinking. The crocodile wanted to bathe in it. I have heard of women enjoying baths of milk, but I've never heard of a crocodile wanting to bathe in wine. Han Sen couldn't help but smile as he watched the enthusiastic little creature. The crocodile's scales were very hot, and although it had already tried to cool itself down, the wine was vaporized almost as soon as it entered the barrels. It was unable to take its time and swim around in the barrel's contents. In no time at all, it went through a few barrels of wine. The small crocodile god came out of the last barrel and roared softly at Han's senator. It seemed as if it wanted more. He wanted Han Sen to return and collect more wine for it. This is a very rare treasure. It took me a while to gather these few barrels, so if you want more, you will have to wait a long time, Han Sen said. Han Sen had many barrels of wine in storage, and he could easily buy a few vineyards. He couldn't spoil the small crocodile god though. He had to plan for the long term. Han Sen brought 2 or 3 barrels for the crocodile each day. It was enough to keep the small creature happy, but it wasn't enough to keep it satisfied. Now Han Sen no longer had to work. The small crocodile wanted him to just bring it wine, but Han Sen still stuck to his cleaning duties. That was because he could dig wherever he wanted without the explicit command or direction of the little crocodile god. Ever since he found glasses, Han Sen hadn't discovered anything useful. His lack of progress was frustrating. He worked in the fortress for a month, but he didn't find anything else of interest. His jade skin reached the 9th tier, so he couldn't level up anymore even if he continued to consume King Xenogenic genes. Han Sen then focused on his Blood Pulse Sutra, leaving the story of genes as the last to be leveled up. Exquisite and Liqueur were so depressed. They could see Han Sen coming and going, as if the place was his own backyard. They wanted to leave too, but no matter how much they tried talking to the 2 crocodile gods, they weren't permitted to go anywhere. They tried to use the wine retrieval excuse, but the crocodile god wasn't interested in what they had to offer. This made them incredibly sad. Han Sen didn't know why the crocodile gods treated them differently, but everything was panning out perfectly for him. Han Sen actually thought it was convenient that the 2 of them were still trapped. If they got free, they might cause him problems of some sort. The very high are nothing that special. They can't even deal with the transmutation deified. They are worse than the ancient god, Han Sen thought to himself. Actually, Han Sen only thought this because he hadn't learned the nature of their strength. The power of the very high didn't lie purely in their combat abilities, and they had nearly limitless resources. If the very high survived long enough, they could become butterflies with ease. That was better than most races. Since he still wasn't managing to dig up any worthwhile items, all Han Sen achieved was making the small crocodile god an alcoholic. Han Sen kept giving it wine, but the creature never drank it. It used every barrel for bathing. It sickened Han Sen to see so much fine wine be wasted. No matter how rich he was, it hurt to see something so precious be poured down the drain. Han Sen examined and excavated the whole fortress, but he didn't find anything useful. He hadn't even been able to find the body that the arm had been attached to. It seemed as if only the arm had been left behind. It looks like I need to find a way out of here. Han Sen wasn't interested in delivering wine to the crocodile gods for the rest of eternity. Lady Exquisite, didn't you say that your elders would come and save you? When are they going to come? Han Sen found a chance to stop by and talk to Exquisite and Likier. I'm not sure. It could take 2 or 3 months. Or it could take a couple of years, Exquisite said. Why would it take them so long? Han Sen was shocked. Exquisite didn't answer Han Sen's question. Actually, the very high had self-spells coded into their bodies. If they were in danger or injured, the self-spell would awaken. If they died, the self-spell would self-destruct, and people were sure to know something had happened to them. But Exquisite and Likier were neither injured nor in danger. The self-spell wasn't going to ring its alarm. If the very high people didn't hear anything from the self-spell, they'd have no clue that something had happened to the two women. After a while, if Exquisite remained missing, the people of her race would notice her absence. They knew where she had gone, but it was hard to determine when they would notice her absence. While the two women were wallowing in their depression, Han Sen set out a grilled goose to munch on. He ate it and drank, picking through a side of fruit as well. They wanted to eat some too. Chapter 2575. Geno art swapped for fruit. The very high were admired by all. No matter where Exquisite and Likier went, they were as popular as the stars and the moon. Even when the extreme king's princes and princesses met with them, the royal children would be extra polite to them. They would treat the two very high like VIPs at all times, not willing to do anything that might offend them. Now they had been reduced to this. The crocodiles were treating them like lowly slaves, whereas Dollar was able to eat nice food and drink lovely beverages all day long. He made no effort to help them out. He never shared his food or did much with them. Exquisite and Likier hadn't brought much food of their own. After all, they had God's Wander. They could use Galaxy Teleport to grab what they needed whenever they wanted. They didn't have to bring simple necessities like food with them, but they had finished all their reserves, and there was nothing more for them in that place. They could last another 2 or 3 months by consuming the energy stored in their bodies, but they still wanted to eat food. It was in the nature of their bodies, and they couldn't help it. Exquisite was faring a little better. She had trained her very high sense for a long time, so her detachment from personal connections, known as forget love, was at a very high level. It helped her separate herself from worldly desires. Likier, however, was in dire straits. She couldn't control her temptation for food. Dollar, can you sell us some of your food? Likier asked Han Sen, chewing her lip distractedly. Sure. What would you like to buy? Grilled chicken or grilled goose? Roast lamb or roast pork? You can have something that flies and something that swims. I have everything you could ever need, Han Sen said expansively, agreeing to the request with haste. There is no need to go to such trouble. Just giving us some of that fruit will do, Likier said, eyeing Han Sen's plate that was stuffed with fresh peaches. The very high were like a mix between the sky and humans. They would kill if they had to, but they wouldn't kill for no reason. They didn't like to waste or take lives without purpose. The chicken that Han Sen was eating smelled nice, but it wouldn't provide much energy. There was no point in eating it, so eating the fruit would be better. Sure. 1 fruit meal for a Geno art. Han Sen picked up a peach that was bigger than his fist, and he smiled at Likier. Why don't you just mug me instead? Likier's eyes opened wide at Han Senator. She couldn't believe her ears. The peach was a xenogenic plant's fruit, but it wasn't high level. Far from it. The fruit was probably ranked no higher than barren. Swapping a fruit like that for a Geno art was practically daylight robbery. It's up to you. I'm not the one who suggested a trade. Han Sen shrugged and began munching on the peach. Juice dribbled from the peach as he bit into it, and a delectable fragrance came wafting out of it. Okay, that branch of fruit for a Geno art. I will make the trade. Likier gritted her teeth and thought to herself, we, the very high, have a lot of Geno arts. I know enough of them to kill you. If I just give you one random art after another, I will take all of your fruit. Wait, I have a condition. The Geno art you give me must be one I've never learned before, Han Sen said. He was scamming Exquisite and Likier, and he wouldn't feel a tiny bit sorry for doing so. Han Sen had believed them to be sky, and he hadn't minded helping them. Now that he knew they were from the very high, his feelings toward them had changed. Any of the very high in the core area wouldn't require his help to kill a bronze tripod, or a deified xenogeniac. That was just impossible to believe. He knew they were up to something, considering the way they had behaved around him. If they had some sort of ulterior motive, then there was no need for Han Sen to be polite with them. He was going to scam them without remorse. If he hadn't learned who they were, Han Sen would have given them the fruit for free. The fruit wasn't worth much to him after all. How am I supposed to know what you have learned? And how am I supposed to know what you can or cannot learn? Li Qiu lifted her lips. Tell me the Geno art's name, and what it can be used for. I can figure it out for myself, Han Sen said without moving. Okay. Have you heard of the Geno art Dragon Blood Evil Breaker? I can swap that Geno art in exchange for your peach, Li Qiu said carefully. Dragon Blood Evil Breaker was a secret Geno art belonging to the dragon, and outsiders were not permitted to read and learn its secrets. The Very High, however, were an exception to that rule. The Very High had selected many dragons for silkworms, and many of those dragons possessed knowledge of Dragon Blood Evil Breaker. The Very High could sense their progress with it, and see into the secrets shrouding Dragon Blood Evil Breaker. In truth, the same principle applied to all races across the whole Geno universe. The secrets of each individual race's Geno arts meant little before the Very High. They could see through everything. It was just as Li Qiu said. The number of Geno arts she knew about could kill Han Senator. It would be no trouble. And she could easily bring out a few hundred. The Very High had a rule about not teaching others the Geno arts that they had collected. They had many Geno arts from many races. In some ways, their race was like an encyclopedia of Geno arts. Of course, it didn't matter how many Geno arts she had. Li Qiu would not sell them out easily. She knew she would soon have Han Sen as her silkworm, and so she wasn't all that worried. Even so, Li Qiu was only going to present him with the Geno arts of outsiders for now. She wasn't willing to leak the secret Geno arts that belonged to the Very High. Plus, Dragon Blood Evil Breaker required the blood of the dragon race to practice. She decided to mention that one in particular, because she didn't think Han Sen could make use of it. She wanted to dishearten him. Fine. Then I will accept the Dragon Blood Evil Breaker. Han Sen agreed to it quickly and tossed her a peach. Han Sen had seen Dragon 1 use Dragon Blood Evil Breaker, and he thought it was a pretty decent Geno art. It was similar to saving money. He didn't know if he could practice it, but simply hearing about it would be helpful. You really want to learn Dragon Blood Evil Breaker? Li Qiu was shocked. She then remembered that Dollar had somehow been able to learn Big Destroyed. With that thought, she considered the possibility that he might actually be able to learn Dragon Blood Evil Breaker. It made her hesitate. The Very High were strict about their rules. Although they had thousands of Geno arts, with many coming from other races, they weren't allowed to leak them to others. Teaching someone an ordinary Geno art would be okay, but Dragon Blood Evil Breaker was a secret skill of the dragons. If the details of the Geno art became common knowledge, it could affect the dragons. That was something the Very High didn't want to see. Are you just saying whatever you can to get the fruit? Are you hesitating because you don't actually know Dragon Blood Evil Breaker? Han Sen saw Li Qiu hesitate. His expression looked something like a smile, but it wasn't pleasant at all. Of course I know Dragon Blood Evil Breaker, but... Li Qiu knew Han Sen was provoking her, but she still hesitated. Make the exchange, Exquisite said suddenly. Third sister. I'm not sure that's a good idea, Li Qiu said to Exquisite. It's fine. I want to see if he can learn Dragon Blood Evil Breaker, Exquisite said smoothly. Her eyes looked so strange. Li Qiu nodded and turned back to Han Senior. All right. I will swap Dragon Blood Evil Breaker for the fruit. Listen closely, because I'm only going to tell you once. Han Sen perked his ears and focused on the skill that Li Qiu began to explain. He didn't know if he could learn it, but he did know that Dragon Blood Evil Breaker was a high-quality art. Chapter 2576. Escaping the fortress. Han Sen still wanted to conduct trades and collect more Geno arts, but after one fruit meal, Li Qiu was no longer interested. Han Sen still didn't have time to learn Dragon Blood Evil Breaker, and he repeatedly ransacked his brain for ideas on how to escape the fortress. Although he was trying to plan a jailbreak, he had become quite close to the small crocodile god. Now, the little crocodile god was dependent on Han Sen for survival, It had become totally addicted to Han Sen's wine. Li Qiu stared at Han Senator. She looked at Han Sun and the little crocodile god, who were currently lying on sunbathing chairs. While they soaked in the rays, Li Qiu had to pour them their wine. They had all been captured, and yet, she was being forced to serve Han Senator. That made her very angry. Goon! Li Qiu stared angrily at Han Sr. Hey little crocodile god, do you want to go and see the outside world? The outside world is better than this place. There are many pretty girls, and a whole lot more wine. You might be able to find a pretty lady crocodile god with nice, smooth skin. With your strength, small crocodile god, the ladies would be crying to get you. You will become so famous in the outside world. Han Sen coaxed, trying to convince the little crocodile god to leave the fortress. Han Sen's Dongxian Sutra wasn't as good at reading other creatures as the very high sense, but after he had been there for a while, he was still able to understand the behavior of the little crocodile god. In that way, they could actually hold conversations. Under Han Sen's influence, the little crocodile god was slowly becoming curious about the outside world. If the little creature had been alone, Han Sun would already have taken him off-world. But the creature was too small, and the big crocodile god wouldn't let it leave. So there was nothing Han Sun could do. However, Han Sun had noticed a window of opportunity. The big crocodile god had to exit the fortress every few days, perhaps to find food. During that time, the little crocodile god was tasked with watching over the prisoners. If they made a single move to escape or cause trouble, the little crocodile god could call on the big crocodile god to hurry back. Exquisite and Li Qiu had tried to escape many times, but they were always brought back. Han Sun didn't try to run. He just encouraged the small crocodile god to leave. If he was successful in convincing it, escape would be trivial. The small crocodile god, constantly hearing Han Sun describe the outside world, became enthralled by the idea. But it didn't know how far away the world that Han Sun described truly was. He was talking about outside of the core area. He was talking about the Geno universe. It was somewhere core area creatures couldn't get to. Of course, the small crocodile god didn't understand the nature of the core area that he'd been born into. But now, he couldn't suppress his giddiness to leave. He was ready to get out of there. It had tried to run off before, but it hadn't gotten too far. This time, Han Sun was able to convince it to go all the way, and it excitedly rumbled at Han Sun to come along with it in a daring escape. Exquisite and Li Qiu were frozen, almost unable to believe Han Sun had been able to manipulate the creature like that. Lying to a child? How cheap. Li Qiu didn't think it was fair. Small crocodile god, bring those two along. Otherwise, there will be no one to serve you. Then, no one will be able to tell how powerful you are. Han Sun pointed at Li Qiu and Exquisite. That hadn't taken much effort. He thought he was doing them a favor. The small crocodile god made some grunting noises, then flew into the burning sea. Li Qiu and Exquisite were happy. Li Qiu had just been decrying Han Sun for tricking a child, but now she was very grateful. The small crocodile god's power wasn't as great as the power of the big crocodile god. Han Sun and the other two had to stick close to the small crocodile god. They needed the protection of its gravity substance chains to avoid being melted by the scary burning sea. It wasn't too long before the small crocodile, Han Sun, and the others were out of the cave. Han Sun and the small crocodile god scoped out the vicinity with care. They didn't see the big crocodile god nearby, and that made them feel relieved. Go! The pearly gates of this beautiful new world are opening for you. You will get wine lady crocodiles, and the love and adoration of many different races. Han Sun saw the small crocodile god looking a little nervous. It was glancing back into the cave and seemed hesitant, so he tried to influence it a bit more. The small crocodile god rumbled happily. It jumped onto Han Sen's hand and swung its claws around. It looked very excited. He is just a child and yet he is so easy to trick. Pleased with himself, Han Sen flew up and escaped the planet. Exquisite and Li Qiu were quick to follow. With haste, the three of them and the small crocodile god left that planet of frightening gravity. They hadn't been away from the planet for very long when the bronze furnace joined them, whistling quietly and belching smoke. It had waited there patiently for Han Sun, which surprised him a lot. He thought it might have run off. The bronze furnace was making a lot of noise as it came toward them. The small crocodile god thought it was hostile at first. In response, the little creature swung one of its gravity substance chains and tied up the bronze furnace. The bronze furnace was stunned. It started to cry, believing it was going to be crushed by an immense force of gravity. "Stop, he's one of us. He's one of our people," Han Sun hastily explained to the small crocodile god. The small crocodile god let go of the bronze furnace. Due to the fact that the small crocodile god was still lying on Han Sen's head, the bronze furnace couldn't leave, and neither could it stay. It didn't know what it was supposed to do. "Let's go. We should leave this area now." Han Sun didn't know where the big crocodile god had wandered off to, since he didn't know how far away it was. They needed to keep going as far as they could to avoid having any nasty encounters with the beast. Their flight was surprisingly smooth, and the big crocodile god didn't show up. They brought the small crocodile god with them, as they teleported a few systems away. Exquisite and Likir used galaxy teleportation. They lost track of how many systems they traveled through. But they were fortunate enough to not encounter the big crocodile god for the length of their journey. "We are free." Likir couldn't believe their escape had come about so easily. The small crocodile god had a lot of potential, but for the time being, it was only a primitive deified. It couldn't trap them as easily as the big crocodile god could. Chapter 2577. Six-core snake god. When Han Sun looked closer, he realized that the circles around the Snake King's neck weren't actually eyes. They were 6 spinning cogwheels. He didn't know what the 6 cogwheels did though. "Quickly, we must go!" Likir shouted at Han Senator. She was on the verge of using God's Wander to escape that place. But before she could teleport away, she saw that the space around her had already been turned on its head. The entire universe appeared to be spinning like a hungry vortex. Han Sun also tried to teleport away, but he found that he couldn't tear space and escape through it like he would need to. It was like he had lost his connection to the outside world. "Oh no, we're trapped in 6 space. In this 6 space, all of space follows the rules set by the 6-core god snake. Your space powers won't be of any use here." Likir was in shock. Han Sun wasn't frightened by this enemy though. He noticed that the 6-core god snake was looking steadily at his head. Clearly, it was after the small crocodile god. The small crocodile god was very young, and it didn't yet know what fear meant. Seeing the 6-core god snake look at it, the little creature simply stared back. It then roared proudly at the 6-core god snake. Han Sun knew the small crocodile god commanding the snake to follow and be its little brother. The 6-core god snake appeared to understand, and it screamed back with immense rage. It opened its mouth and unleashed some space substance chains. They flew toward the small crocodile god like an aurora trailing through space. Han Sun quickly evaded them, and the small crocodile god flew forward. In all its boisterous glory, it fancied taking on the 6-core god snake all by itself. It wanted to teach the huge creature a lesson. It made this decision because of Han Sun's constant compliments, no doubt. Han Sun had been going on and on about how powerful and almighty the small crocodile god was. He had filled the creature's head with nonsense, as if it was the strongest creature in existence. He had even claimed that every race would treat it like a god. He said people would admire and show great love to the little crocodile. He said every creature would want to become its subordinate. The poor, naive little crocodile god thought its mother was the most people being in the universe, and that it was number 2. It thought all other creatures were tiny by comparison, so it wasn't going to stand for the 6-core god snake's offense. Han Sun hadn't run far before coming to a stop. He wanted to watch the fight between the snake and crocodile. "Run! The small crocodile god isn't a worthy opponent for the 6-core god snake. We should leave now before it is too late," Exquisite said, flying over to Han Sr. "The small crocodile god's power should be as good as a primitive deified here, right? Can anything else in the core area be stronger than it?" Han Sun asked. "The 6-core god snake is one of the strongest xenogeneics in the core area," Likir explained. "The snake isn't as strong as the big crocodile god, but it is as good as a primitive can get. Plus, its space powers are so strong, And in addition to the fighting experience it has compared to the little crocodile god, well, the newborn crocodile god doesn't really stand a chance of fighting back. Pang! What Li Qier said immediately came true. There was a loud noise. And when Han Sun turned to take a look, he saw that the little crocodile god had been sent flying away by the six-core god snake. The little creature rolled end over end through space. It eventually hit a planet, and the planet blew up. So strong! Han Sun thought in shock. He took the bronze furnace with him as he flew away. The space around them was under the snake's control, so they couldn't teleport away. Even Exquisite and Li Qier were forced to fly away instead of teleporting. The space behind them seemed to groan with a strange sound. Han Sun couldn't help but look back. There, he saw that the small crocodile god's face was swollen and discolored. It started to cry. Its small eyes were streaming with tears. "I'm sorry, little crocodile god. You can't beat him and neither can I. At least you are a deified xenogeneic. You should just run while you still have the chance to. Don't take it out on me. We aren't being cruel here. You took us as hostages, remember? We are enemies," Han Sun said over his shoulder as he flew. Han Sun followed the very high women as they flew away. But some unexpected pangs of regret were striking Han Sun's heart. He thought that the teary eyes of the small crocodile god were meant for him. So, why did the six-core god snake want to kill the small crocodile god? Han Sun asked Li Qier as he continued flying. The six-core god snake is one of the rare core xenogeneics that can evolve. Its name wasn't always six-core god snake. It used to be known as the two-core god snake. Its neck only had two cogwheels back then. Whenever it eats a deified core gene, it can create another cogwheel, and its power increases. It now has 6 cores, and so the power it has should make it the most powerful primitive deified out there. Plus, it has scary space powers. It isn't like the Gold Armor General, or those other core deified xenogeneics, Li Qier explained. Does the 6-core god snake have a weakness? Han Sun asked with a frown. It does. Its power is very strong, but core xenogeneics always have flaws. The same applies to the 6-core god snake. Its weakness is those cogwheels. 4 of them were obtained by eating 4 other deified xenogeneics. They aren't as good as the creature's original cogwheels. That is its weakness, Li Qier said. You guys should go on ahead, Han Sun said. Then he suddenly flew back. What are you doing? Li Qier and Exquisite asked in confusion. They weren't quite sure what Han Sun was planning. You guys should leave now. I'm going back to watch, Han Sun said. He felt something weird in his heart, and so he decided to go back. Is he going to save that small crocodile god? Li Qier watched Han Sun leave. She couldn't believe that what she said was actually happening. He is controlled by his emotions way too much. He will be at a constant disadvantage like that. While his talents are exceptional, he is too dangerous to take on as a silkworm, Exquisite said emotionlessly. But if I was trapped and couldn't fight back, I wish there was someone out there driven by an emotion that made them want to save me, Li Qier said with a conflicted expression. Everything must die. With an attitude like that, your practice with the very high sense will not go very far. Exquisite frowned. The small crocodile god had been captured by space substance chains. It hung in space, unable to move. Thankfully, its body was too strong for the chains to dig into its scaled flesh. The space substance kept hitting it, but the blows could only make the small creature bleed. The 6-core god snake was staring down at the small crocodile god like a hungry demon. Its substance chains kept raging, lashing the little creature over and over. The small crocodile god continued to cry out as more and more bloody wounds appeared across its body. The small crocodile god's powers weren't enough to break the space substance chains. It was unable to avoid the hits. It was just hanging where it was being lashed over and over. Streaks of blood ran down its body. Although it wasn't heavily injured, it was in agony. Its tears streamed off its face to fall like droplets of rain. Chapter 2578. Fighting God Snake. If it wasn't for the small crocodile god's body, having a high mass that made it tougher than the average deified xenogeneic, it would have been ripped to shreds by the 6-core god snake. It was a shame the small crocodile god was so young. Its body wasn't strong enough to completely repel the damage done to it by the six-core god snake's space powers. More and more wounds appeared on its body as time went by. The small crocodile god was so scared that it looked like the creature was about to wet itself. The six-core god snake kept using its space substance chains to lash the small crocodile god's body. It eventually got tired of doing this, and so it just opened its mouth. Its scary fangs came bearing down on the small crocodile god. The small crocodile god's small eyes widened in terror. Tears fell as it desperately tried to wiggle its way out of the snake's grasp. But under the restrictions imposed by the substance chains, the little creature had no hope of running. The six-core god snake's fangs were going to slice into him. Pang! Suddenly, a cold metal light appeared, slamming into one of the six-core god snake's green cogwheels. The six-core snake god screamed in agony. The small crocodile god saw a giant metal pillar thrust its way through the eye-like cogwheel. Han Sun was behind that metal pillar, and he punched the back of the metal pillar continuously to drive it in deeper. The small crocodile god was as happy as it was shocked. The six-core god snake shuddered with every blow. It was in pain. The space substance chains that had bound the small crocodile god loosened. The small crocodile god's black light shone, and it managed to escape from the grip of the substance chains. Han Sun continued to pummel the back end of the sky god pillar. He had stolen that deified treasure from the Extreme King. He couldn't use all his power, but his attacks so far seemed to be effective. He shoved the pillar into the cogwheel until the cogwheel cracked. With the sky god pillar lodged inside, the cogwheel could no longer spin. It was a shame that Han Sun wasn't deified. Otherwise, with his deified power combined with the sky god pillar, his blows could simply shatter the six-core god snake's cogwheels. The six-core god snake lowered its head and caught sight of Han Senator. It roared with rage. Its body unleashed several substance chains that looked like snakes. They flew straight for Han Sr. Each space substance chain seemed to tear the fabric of space as it came. It was like a space-cutting skill. If Han Sen's body was unable to withstand one of those space cuts, he would be ripped apart by the power of the chains. Han Sen didn't plan on trying to avoid the lashing though. His body shone with gold light, and a collection of gold, robotic plates of armor formed around him. He turned into the gold robot general. The space substance chains came against the gold robot armor, slicing into the surface of the metal armor. It was like many invisible knives were trying to drive through the armor. Sparks erupted across the surface of the gold armor like fireworks. Because Han Sen's gold armor was so hard, the space substance chains were unable to completely cut through it. Han Sun shoved the gold general's speed to the max, and streamers of golden energy spewed out of the armor's metal pipes. It was like a pair of golden wings were spreading from the armor on Han Sen's back. The gold general drew back an arm as far as it would go, then threw a punch forward like a volcano erupting. The punch landed on the back of the sky god pillar. The sky god pillar was driven forward by the impact of the golden general's fist. A loud cracking sound came from the six-core god snake's cogwheel. The cogwheel was completely shattered by the sky god pillar, and the pillar pierced through the six-core god snake's neck. The six-core god snake shrieked in pain and swung its tail against Han Sr. Han Sen saw the tail coming, but he couldn't avoid it. The tail seemed to cast shadows all through space. He couldn't see it clearly, and it crashed against his gold general armor. The gold general was hit, and Han Sun was sent flying away like a star. He slammed into a giant planet, and the power of his fall poisoned the planet with radiation. A shockwave covered half the planet. Mountains fell, and the ground was lifted. The rocks rolled like waves. Half of the planet suddenly looked like the end of the world. The six-core god snake didn't stop there. It hurtled forward, straight for the planet where its enemy had landed. Countless space substance chains coiled around the snake as it headed for the gold general, who was down on the planet. Small crocodile god, what are you waiting for? Gravity area. Han Sen shouted. The small crocodile god was still frozen, but hearing Han Sen's voice shook him out of his shock. He cast his gravity substance chains, generating a black shield that covered the six-core god snake. Under the influence of that power, the snake accelerated like an asteroid as it fell to the planet's surface. Still in the gold armor, Han Sun stood up. He stomped on the ground and used his gold energy. The gold energy started to run out of the pipes in a stream, then a river. It was like a thruster pack that lifted the gold general into the sky. It was headed for the falling six-core god snake. Han Sen guided the gold general, using it to gather up power inside his fist. A powerful gold godlight manifested across it. Han Sen's fist flashed forward, battering the sky god pillar that was still attached to the six-core god snake's neck. The sky god pillar punched straight through the body of the six-core god snake. Even the gold general itself ended up ripping through the snake's body. The gold general slowed to a stop, still holding onto the giant sky god pillar. Han Sen turned and looked back at the six-core god snake. The force of gravity was still making it fall toward the planet. Pang! The six-core god snake hit the planet with a force that was scarier than Han Sen's descent. This was definitely not that planet's lucky day. It had taken 2 scary hits in a row, and now, it looked completely destroyed. Nice job, small crocodile god. Keep applying gravity to that fiend. Han Sen shouted as he piloted the gold general down to press the sky god pillar against the six-core god snake. The six-core god snake was severely limited by the incredible force weighing down on it. The creature's movements were incredibly slow, and it was completely unable to dodge the gold general's attacks. The six-core god snake shrieked strangely. Countless space substance chains opened like a chrysanthemum. Then came for Han Senator. They stretched forward to hold him off, trying to keep him from directly approaching the six-core god snake. Han Sen's face didn't change, and he didn't dodge. He pushed the power of the gold general to the max as he headed for the six-core god snake. As countless space substance chains tangled around the gold general, Han Sen shouted. He used the gold general to toss the sky god pillar in front of himself. And then, there was a burst of gold energy. A punch that was prettier than the sun came forth to strike the back of the sky god pillar. The sky god pillar became a pillar of light. Every part of the pillar shone as it tore through the planet's atmosphere and slammed into another cogwheel. The six-core god snake had been unable to run. The six-core god snake was restrained by the small crocodile god's gravity substance chains, and so it couldn't even jerk to the side to avoid the strike. Another cogwheel core snapped in half under the force of the blow. The pillar pinned the beast to the planet as it screamed in pain. The space substance chains broke, shattering into 1,000,000 pieces as the snake thrashed. Han Sen used the gold general to jump past the falling remnants of the substance chains. He was headed for the six-core god snake that was pinned to the planet. The small crocodile god roared happily. Chapter 2579. Claiming another deified beast soul. With Han Sen controlling the six-core god snake, the small crocodile god became cocky. The six-core god snake had beat him up earlier, and so he gnashed his teeth now in rage. His body unleashed a black light, and even more heavy substance chains thudded into the six-core god snake. The six-core god snake's movements slowed to a crawl. There was no way that it could escape the planet now. 2 of its cogwheels were destroyed now, and it was heavily injured. It moved with snail-like speed. The small crocodile god's gravity substance chains were pinning it in place, keeping it from avoiding Han Sen's attacks. Pang! 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 The gold general flew over to the six-core god snake that was pinned to the planet. Instead of pulling out the pillar that was pinning the snake, he used his fists to strike the creature. Gold energy carried each swing. It was like a glowing storm was raining down on the captured snake. The six-core god snake remained pinned in place. The small crocodile god's substance chains had it trapped, and there was nothing it could do to defend itself. Under the gold general's continuing barrage of attacks, the cogwheels broke one after another. In seconds, another 2 had crumbled to dust. As this went on, the six-core god snake was suffering horrendously. It cast countless space substance chains. They rose like an infinity of venomous snakes and tried to wrap themselves around the gold general. Han Sen was running his gold general at max capacity. Still, he couldn't free his fist from the substance chains. He was trapped and could no longer move. Pang! The six-core god snake's tail slammed into him, sending the gold general flying again. Its anger fueled that scary attack, caving in the gold general's chest. The six-core god snake is so powerful. It is gravely injured and yet it can still fight. No wonder it is considered one of the best in the core area. The gold general tore a trench across a long section of the planet's surface before Han Sun could regain control of the machine. The six-core god snake's tail coiled around the sky god pillar and pulled the pillar out of its body. It wanted to move, but the small crocodile god appeared in front of it. The little creature struck one of the two cogwheels the snake had remaining. There was a snapping noise. The small crocodile god managed to destroy the cogwheel, and it was a painful blow for the six-core god snake. The agony made the snake's long body shiver and shake, and it tried to swing its tail toward the small crocodile god instead. Pang! The small crocodile god flew away like a ball, and the sky god pillar drifted away as well. Han Sun drove the gold general to reclaim the sky god pillar. With his weapon in hand, he thrust his arm toward the six-core god snake. While the snake was still contorted in pain, Han Sun penetrated the creature's final cogwheel. The six-core god snake thrashed and twisted. It tried using its tail to smack the gold general away again, but the small crocodile god was furiously returning to the fray. A heavy substance chain landed across the snake and slowed it even further. The gold general approached as this occurred. Han Sun's fists angrily pummeled the wounds of the six-core god snake. A frenzy of gold punches hit the snake like a crazy and wrathful storm. The six-core god snake's body was slowly driven into the planet. Chunks of rock flew everywhere. Pang! Han Sun continued to punch, and the six-core god snake and the planet exploded. The scary explosion spread through space like a beautiful firework. Core deified xenogenic hunted. Six-core god snake. Deified xenogenic gene found. Obtained six-core god snake beast soul. I got the beast soul. Han Sun grinned. Far away in space, Exquisite and Likier were frozen. They had used their very high sense to watch the entire battle unfold. They thought Han Sun was quite amazing when he turned into the gold general. But then he cooperated with the small crocodile god to defeat the six-core god snake with relative ease. It really was Dollar that stole the sea sky eye and the sky god pillar. Likier's heart was a confused mess of emotion at that moment. She had thought from the beginning that the gold armor general had some connection to Dollar, but she hadn't suspected that Dollar himself could have been that gold general. What is that? Exquisite's normally emotionless face looked shocked. She recognized the gold general, but she didn't understand how Dollar was able to become the foe he had once defeated. I do not know. Likier shook her head with a wry smile. She knew that was the gold general, but she didn't know how Dollar could transform into it. She could not imagine what forces could allow that. The small crocodile god ran to the six-core god snake's corpse. It kicked and bit it savagely. It was a shame that the little creature didn't eat meat. And the six-core god snake's body was like metal anyway. There was probably nothing worth eating there regardless. Han Sun put away the gold general that had been badly damaged. The six-core god snake was strong. Even the gold general's powerful defensives had taken a lot of nasty damage. Some parts of it were broken entirely. If the small crocodile god hadn't used his gravity substance chains to restrict the snake, the gold general would have been cut to pieces. Digging out the six-core god snake's core xenogenic gene, Han Sun noted how it was a jade green cogwheel. It was only around the size of a fist, and it had spun continuously in the six-core god snake's head. That is some good stuff. Han Sun could feel the scary presence emitted by the cogwheel, and so he complimented it. But he still couldn't absorb deified genes just yet, so he put it away for now. The small crocodile god spent the last of his anger on the corpse of the snake. He flew to Han Sun and began to make noises that were a mixture of screams and crying. It was like the little guy claiming that Han Sun had lied to him. Small crocodile god, you are so powerful. You killed such a powerful xenogenic. You must be the strongest creature in the universe. Han Sun looked at the small crocodile god with admiration and complimented it profusely. The small crocodile god was about to continue ranting at Han Sun, but as he heard all this, he became cocky. He squinted his little eyes and looked very proud. He looked as if he was strong and almighty, and forgot about his argument with Han Sr. Kids are easy to trick, Han Sun thought, looking at the prideful little crocodile god with a smile. The small crocodile god leaped back onto Han Sen's head. It raised its head and roared. It seemed to be telling Han Sen to go and find more xenogeniacs for it to kill. Han Sen flew away, and as he went, he examined the core deified beast soul he had obtained from the 6-core god snake. Core deified beast soul 6-core god snake. Weapon a weapon beast soul? It's a weapon beast soul. It is finally here. I wonder what it will be. Since it came from a snake, perhaps it will be a spear. Maybe it will be a sword. Or maybe it will end up being a dagger. Han Sen was so happy. He had wanted a deified weapon for the longest time. And this was a space power weapon beast soul, so it had to be something special. Without hesitation, Han Sen summoned the 6-core god snake beast soul. A green compound bow appeared in his hands. The bow looked so cool. It had mechanical arms, and its body was decorated with 6 wheels. It had the features of a mechanical cold-based weapon. It was chilly to the touch, and it looked frightening. He could already tell that it would have unparalleled accuracy. The cold-based weapon exuded a murderous feeling. Something about its styling reminded Han Sen of a complex machine. Han Sen could see the bow shimmer with the shadow of the 6-core god snake. This is a bow. Han Sen looked at the 6-core snake bow in his hands in surprise. Chapter 2580. The snakes are coming. Han Sen immediately loved his new bow. He had recently used Autumn Wind's wind string, but the bow already possessed an owner. Forcing it open hadn't felt good, but this 6-core snake bow was different. Han Sen held its body and pulled the string effortlessly. The cogwheels across it spun as he drew the string back, and it didn't cost him any strength to make use of it. And the power the bow could unleash was just as great as he had hoped. In fact, this bow was capable of shooting projectiles with more power than wind string could have managed. Han Sen could feel the space power coming from the bow, but he didn't know how that space power would affect the use of the 6-core snake bow. This was the first time Han Sen had gotten the opportunity to make use of a deified beast soul weapon. It was difficult to gauge the amount of power it possessed. Han Sen didn't plan on trying it out immediately. He was willing to save this bow for his true identity as Han Senator for $. The Gold General already provided enough power to battle deified beings. Plus, it wouldn't even be possible for Han Sen to use the bow while he was using the Gold General. Therefore, keeping the bow as $. Would be pointless. However, the weapon couldn't be more perfect for Han Sen's identity. The Peacock King's soul robe wouldn't affect his use of the bow, and it would actually give the bow even more power. It would definitely give him more security, even if deifieds came for him. With the Peacock King's soul robe and the 6-core snake bow, they wouldn't be able to kill Han Sr. If those extreme king guys dare to come after me again, I will feed them arrows. I'll let them know I have feelings too. Han Sen put the 6-core snake bow away. He would use it later. He had used the Dongxian area to hide himself and the small crocodile god while he looked over the bow. Not even Exquisite and Li Qiu could see what he was doing now. The 6-core snake bow wouldn't be noticed. All that I'm missing now are deified arrows. Having a bow without arrows isn't perfect, Han Sen thought greedily. Exquisite and Li Qiu were going to chase after Han Sen, but they soon realized he had vanished from their abilities of detection. They could no longer detect his presence, no matter what method they used. They ran to the place where Han Sen was last seen, but he seemed to be long gone. Not even the very high sense could find a trace of him. This $. Is a very mysterious individual, Exquisite said with a frown. Not just mysterious. Everything he does is a little beyond belief, but it will be hard to convince someone like that to become my silkworm. Li Qiu sighed. No matter how strong he is, he cannot elude the very high forever. If you really want to pick him, we can go back home and have the Elder unearth his identity. Then we can formulate a plan to take him, Exquisite said. Li Qiu shook her head. He will be my silkworm. It is best if I try to bring him in myself. Exquisite said nothing, but she didn't have much hope for Li Qiu's efforts. Before she met $, Exquisite would never have expected that a potential silkworm might refuse an offer from the very high. But Han Sen was so amazing that she was even double-guessing the prestige of her race. It would be very difficult to convince someone like that to become a silkworm. Plus, Li Qir's very high sense wasn't perfect yet. But Li Qir insisted, so Exquisite saw no reason to argue. Han Sun brought the small crocodile god around with him to hunt. They killed a few core king xenogeneics. The small crocodile god was happy at first, but now he was growing tired. Han Sun brought out some wine to make the creature happy again. But the small crocodile god was becoming harder to please. He wanted to see the outside world more and more. The place I told you about exists, but you can't see it in the core area. You are a creature of the core area. You cannot leave. So, how can I take you to see what is out there? Han Sun was annoyed by this prospect too. Fortunately, the bronze furnace was there. It was able to help Han Sun by making the small crocodile god much happier. The small crocodile god had killed many xenogeneics for the bronze furnace, and now, there were many swords inside the furnace. Han Sun used glasses to examine the furnace. Its potential was 5 stars too. That was the max a king class could be before becoming deified. What a shame. The xenogeneics from the core area cannot leave. If they could, I could keep them by my side at all times. Han Sun sighed. Han Sun had the bronze furnace lead them around. Han Sun soon left the core area, though, and he returned to the white whale. In the past, whenever Han Sun returned, the pirates would happily welcome him. But this time, no one even noticed when he appeared. Everyone was watching something outside of the white whale, and they seemed to be frozen with shock. Even Bauer was. Han Sun didn't know what was going on. He followed everyone's gazes, and found that there was a group of snakes coming to the land. They were emerging from the Black Sea, and the white tiger was trying to fight them off. These battles had happened many times before, but this time, it was different. There were too many groups of snakes coming out of the Black Sea. There were many times the number of snakes that had appeared on any previous occasion. The snakes slithered onto the island in hordes and began munching on the mushrooms. They were scarier than a swarm of locusts. The white tiger was killing them, but there were too many snakes. It was unable to kill them all. The snakes slithered onto the island in greater and greater numbers. Oh no! Fang Qingyu suddenly breathed upon seeing the snake hordes. Oh no, what? The pirates looked at Fang Qingyu. Fang Qingyu looked terrible, and he said, "If the white tiger cannot stop the snakes, all the mushrooms here will be eaten by the creatures. That means we will have no food for ourselves." "Pa, I thought you meant something more severe. That is no big deal. We can trade for food in the core area with others," a pirate said. "It's not that simple. Listen, if all the mushrooms are gone, then the white tiger might get hungry and come after us. And how about the snakes themselves? Aside from the mushrooms out there?" Before Fang Qingyu finished, everyone knew what he meant. They all looked at the mushrooms on each other's heads. They felt a chill. If the snakes treated them like food, they would have to stop the snakes' advance. And that probably wouldn't go too well for them. They had seen how scary the snakes were, as many of them could be king class. But the snakes also came in seemingly infinite numbers. It would be impossible to kill them all. If the white tiger couldn't stop the snakes, there was little they could do. "Little red bird, go out and help," Han Sun said to the little red bird. If the snake group took over the island, it would be quite the annoyance for them. That was why Han Sun allowed the little red bird to help the white tiger fight off the snakes. But before the little red bird did anything, a harsh wind blew across the Black Sea. It created giant, tumultuous waves as a giant monster emerged from the black water. Chapter 2581. Tentacle Monster. That monster was breathtakingly ugly. It was like a giant worm, but countless hair-like tentacles writhed from the sides of its body. The beast crawled out of the black water, its body still dripping the corrosive liquid of the sea. When the white tiger saw the monster, its expression changed. It roared to the sky, its mouth stretched wide open. Then, a mushroom rain began to storm down on the big monster. The mushrooms exploded near the monster, turning into giant spore clouds that hung in the air. Mushrooms began to grow on the heads of the snakes all around the spores. As the small mushrooms grew, the bodies of the snakes were sucked dry. They collapsed onto the ground like dust. Fang Qingyu and the pirates stared at the battle with wide eyes. The pirates were so scared, and they screamed. If our mushrooms grow big, will they suck us dry too? Everyone was scared, but Han's son reassured them by saying, "Don't worry. The mushrooms on our heads are different from the mushrooms plaguing those snakes." The crew felt much safer after Han's son said that. Although their nerves continued to rattle, the ugly monster stood in the center of those spore clouds, and the clouds were heaviest right around the monster's body. But even so, it didn't seem to be afflicted with the power-draining mushrooms. The monster moved onto the island. It ate a lot of mushrooms and the strange snakes moved with it. The white tiger was unable to do anything to stop them. The white tiger kept firing its mushroom rain, but that attack only seemed to affect the smaller snakes. It did nothing to that horrendous beast. Furthermore, the monster was so unaffected that it completely ignored the white tiger. It simply dragged its mountainous body toward the mushroom forest. It opened its mouth wide and began gnashing its teeth to bite and chew. It was able to swallow a few acres of forest in no time. No matter how many mushrooms the island contained, it clearly wouldn't be enough to sate the hunger of that monster. The white tiger became extremely upset as it watched the enormous beast. The white tiger dug its head into the ground and disappeared. No way. It ran away so soon. Fang Qingyu and the others hadn't expected that. But the next second, the white tiger emerged underneath the monster. Its claws tore into the white tiger's belly. For a split second, everyone thought that the white tiger had cleverly gained the upper hand. Then the monster's silky tentacles moved, reaching down and tying up the white tiger like a zongzi. The white tiger struggled and roared, but it couldn't escape from the tentacles. Those tiny tentacles appeared to be alive. They traced the white tiger's mouth, ears, eyes, and nose. Then the lecherous things began drilling into each orifice. The white tiger began to release horrendous, deafening screams. Everyone felt a chill while watching it. Their bodies flared with goosebumps. They had seen many people be killed before, and not even watching a person be dismembered would make them flinch. But seeing all those hair-like tentacles drilling into the mouth, ears, eyes, and nostrils of the white tiger was enough to give them a proper chill. The white tiger kept struggling. It tried to gnaw and bite off the silk-like tentacles, but once the tentacles were bitten free, they could still move of their own volition. They were like worms, drilling into the creature's body. The sight made people feel itchy. "Little Red, go and help him," Han's son said to the little red bird. The little red bird flew, and flames bloomed around it. As it departed the white whale, it became a fiery phoenix. Wherever it flew, red flames rose around it and incinerated the snakes in its proximity. Golden fire shot from the little red bird's mouth. The fire landed atop the silk-like tentacles and burned them to dust. The white tiger was saved and freed from the bindings that coiled around it. The monster seemed to be frightened by the fires of the little red bird's phoenix flame. It stopped eating the mushrooms, spun its body around, and used the eye upon its forehead to stare at the little red bird. The little red bird screeched loudly. It flapped its wings, sending its phoenix flames raging toward the monster like a firestorm. The monster's countless tentacles suddenly wrapped around its body, forming a ball-shaped shell. The phoenix flames landed atop the newly formed shell and started to burn through it. But the fire only made it through the outer layer. There were more layers on the inside. The fire burned deeper, but the tentacles seemed endless. No amount of burning would be enough, it appeared. Pang! The little red bird was happily burning away at the monster when suddenly, a big spear that was like a mountain came out from the rocks beneath. The spear hit the little red bird before it could react, and sent the little red bird spinning away, amidst a haze of fiery explosions. Han's son had a closer look, and he found that the giant spear had been formed from the monster's smaller tentacles. After the hit that the little red bird had taken, its fire seemed to be weaker. It screamed in rage, and when it screamed, the strength and vigor of its flames returned. It hurled itself back into the fight with the monster. The monster moved its silk tentacles, letting them writhe together. Many wings formed around the monster's body, and those wings began to beat in tandem to make the body of the creature fly very quickly. It was no slower than the little red bird. The monster and the little red bird chased each other through the air. The silk tentacles on the monster seemed innumerable, and they could take on any shape. They could form shields and weapons if they wished to. The little red bird's fire could drive back the tentacles for a while, but no lasting damage was ever done. A lot of the weird snakes were still headed for the island, and the white tiger remained there to deal with them. But there were still too many of them, and it didn't matter how many were killed, as more and more would show up. They refused to retreat from the island. Whoever is king class or above should go out there and help, Han Sen said. Then, he summoned his Peacock King's soul robe and hastily departed the white whale. Bauer jumped onto Han Sen's shoulder to go with him. Gu Qingqing and Elysian Moon went with him too. The Extreme King Knights and Pirates also went out to fight. They knew this was a matter of life and death, and so nobody thought twice about going out there to fight. Han Sen didn't go after the horde of snakes though. He was headed for the little red bird and the monster that were still fighting in the sky. His body glowed like a rainbow as he flew toward the monster. The monster reacted to his approach incredibly quickly. It continued to fight the little red bird, but it also spawned many more tentacles that formed a shield to stop the corrosion induced by the rainbow light. While the rainbow light quickly melted through the makeshift shield, the tentacles were able to immediately form a new one. It would continue doing so until the rainbow light cast by Han Sen was finished. When Han Sen got close to the monster, the tentacles formed a big hammer that tried to strike him. Han Sen looped through the air like a phoenix to avoid the hammer. He cast a rainbow light across his body, but the rainbow light was blocked by another shield of tentacles. Although the monster was fighting two enemies, it was dealing with Han Sen and the little red bird's attacks with perfect precision. Chapter 2582. Retreat. The monster was like a fighting machine. It could rotate 360 degrees in a moment, and it could release tentacles from any part of its body. The tentacles could weave themselves together to create whatever weapon or defense best suited the needs of its fight. The scariest thing about it was that the tentacles were deified class, and the whole composition of the beast had a strong life power. No matter how many times it was struck, it could recompose itself. Facing such an opponent, Han Sen and the little red bird weren't sure what to do. Han Sen and the bird were attacking the monster together, but they were at a disadvantage. Real deified xenogeneics are scary. Those fake deified xenogeneics in the core area are nothing compared to this. Han Sen was shocked. He couldn't think of a way in which they could defeat this foe. An idea occurred to him, and he summoned his 6-core snake bow. He didn't have any deified arrows for it, so he had to summon a king-class arrow beast soul. He placed the arrow on the 6-core snake bow and pulled the string. Whoosh! The moment Han Sen let the arrow fly, the 6-core snake bow's 6 wheels spun. The arrow was imbued with a strange power, and it immediately disappeared. When the arrow appeared again, it was in front of the monster. It soared right into the eye upon the monster's forehead. The 6-core snake bow gives space power to the arrows it shoots. Han Sen realized with pleasure. That meant every arrow the 6-core snake bow fired would teleport. That was better than Han Sen's skill for drilling arrows. When people were shot by an arrow from this bow, they wouldn't be able to trace its path toward them. Plus, Han Sen was also able to tell that the arrow could tear through the fabric of space. That was the power the 6-core snake bow could imbue upon the projectiles he used with it. The king-class beast soul arrow received enough of a buff from the 6-core snake bow to pierce through the monster's eye. Half the arrow embedded itself firmly in the eye, and blood sprayed out around it. This is a nice bow, Han Sen thought happily. The bow's power was perfect for Han Senator, but Han Sen didn't stay happy for long. Tentacles grew from the injured monster's eye. The tentacles wrapped around the beast's soul arrow and removed the power Han Sen had given to the projectile. Then the monster pulled out the beast's soul arrow and cracked it. That injured eye was covered by tentacles and swiftly healed. Is the monster's entire body made of silk? Han Sen wondered. Quickly, Han Sen's guess was confirmed. He used his 6-core snake bow to strike the monster's body. The same result was achieved. No matter where Han Sen fired, tentacles would appear and patch up the monster in no time at all. I believe I can kill you. Han Sen added his turtle spell to the arrow in a bid to slow the beast down. The turtle's skill was applied to the monster. It managed to make the monster's body slower. But Han Sun was soon surprised to learn that the monster could shed the parts of its body that contained turtle. That removed the effects of the spell from the greater mass of the beast. Han Sun tried to apply the turtle symbol in many different ways, but ultimately, it was ineffective. The monster was like a gecko that could keep reproducing its tail. This creature could cut off any part of its body to no negative effect. This guy is more disgusting than Bar, Han Sun said. The little red bird and Han Sun didn't know what to do against the monster. The monster kept using its tentacles to form all sorts of different weapons to attack them. Some of its attacks changed weapons unexpectedly at the last moment. It could make knives, spears, swords, and sticks. It could also make shields and fists. The monster was like an invincible killing machine. It was giving Han Sun and the little red bird a headache. Gu Qingcheng and the others were helping the white tiger tackle all the smaller snakes. But things weren't going so well for them either. More and more of those weird snakes slithered up onto the island. Their numbers were growing. Whenever the defenders killed one snake, 2 more took its place. Half the island was now wholly swarmed by the snakes. The white tiger suddenly meowed to the sky. Its cry was directed at Han Sr. Han Sun didn't understand what the white tiger wanted. The white tiger jumped and drilled into the ground. When it reappeared, it was 100 miles away. Then, it called to Han Sun again. Han Sun now understood. It wanted Han Sun to follow it. Although Han Sun didn't understand what the white tiger was thinking, he knew that fighting like this was futile. Even if he and the little red bird could survive, Fang Qingyu and the others would likely be killed. Bauer, you drive. Follow it and let's go. Han Sun threw Bauer into the white whale. Bauer dropped through the air. When the ground came near, she flipped and landed softly upon the white whale. She hurried inside and fired it up, then piloted it toward the white tiger. Gu Qingcheng and the others fell back to the white whale as well. Han Sun and the little red bird kept fighting as they made their retreat. They wouldn't allow the monster a chance to attack the white whale. The group of snakes was like a black ocean beneath the white whale. They destroyed everything in sight. The fairy tale-like Mushroom Island was turned into a ruined rocky crag. Han Sun and the little red bird flew a great distance away from the monster, but it no longer seemed to be going after them. It started to gorge on the mushrooms now that it could do so uninterrupted. Han Sun and the little red bird no longer provoked it. They flew next to the white whale to protect it, and as they did, they all proceeded to follow the white tiger. Their situation was a dire one. Food was now going to be a problem. The scariest thing was that the snakes and the monster were both issues that they had no idea how to solve. The white whale flew over the island. As they moved beyond the snakes, they saw the mushroom forest behind them get consumed. Suddenly, Han Sen's face grew pale as he looked at one snake among the writhing mass. After eating a lot of mushrooms, its body became larger. It swelled to 10 times its previous size, and its body started to grow tentacles. It was like a smaller version of that Goliath monster. They aren't snakes. They're baby versions of that big one. Han Sun and the others now understood. They looked quite glum. One monster was hard enough to deal with. If they all became monsters, it would be disastrous. And as everyone was trying to process the new information, a few more of the snakes grew bigger. They became just like the monster that was covered in tentacles. But their auras didn't reach the horrifying level of the largest one just yet. They were king class most likely, and almost as good as a half-deified. Is this a joke? One of the pirates mumbled in shock. No one answered him. And that was because no one knew what it was. The white tiger kept running through the mushroom forest. But if the white whale started to lag, it would stop and roar up at them. It went back to running when they caught up. It was like it was leading them someplace. Chapter 2583. It's hard to tell if it's good or bad. Han Sun and the others had explored this island many times before. Aside from the mushrooms, there was nothing special to be found. They had searched the broken battleship repeatedly, but nothing important was ever discovered. Where is the white tiger taking us? Is he going to take us away from here somehow? Han Sun wondered, intrigued. But Han Sun was soon disappointed. The white tiger wasn't planning on leaving the island. They came to a giant mushroom that was around 3 stories tall. The tiger walked up to the mushroom and slapped it. The mushroom fell over, revealing an underground cave that was hidden beneath. There's a cave below here? Han Sen murmured in surprise. He didn't know what material this island was made of, but the rocks were so hard that not even deified powers could shatter them. Making a cave there would be very difficult. The white tiger disappeared into the cave. After a while it came out. It made some noises in Han Sen's direction, as if it was hurrying him to go in. Han Sen saw that the snakes weren't too far behind them. If they entered the cave now, the snakes might arrive before they had a chance to leave. That would thrust them into the maw of another nasty fight. But as Han Sen thought about it some more, he realized that they had little choice if they wanted to stay on the island. The snakes would be their enemies as long as they remained on the island, and there was little they could do against the snakes in their current state. Everyone disembarked the white whale. Han Sen shrank the white whale and put it away, then dropped into the underground cave. The others couldn't do anything except follow. They had been inside the cave for less than 30 seconds when the snakes arrived, covering the ground like a black blanket. Many of the slithery serpents poked their heads into the cave. Because there weren't any mushrooms, however, the snakes didn't seem to be very interested. After looking around the cave briefly, they crawled back out. Han Sen and the others continued to follow the white tiger. Han Sen soon realized that the cave was a natural formation, not a man-made hollow. That made him feel very relieved. If it was man-made, then whatever made the cave could be very dangerous to them. If it was natural, on the other hand, there was a chance it was just an ordinary cave that could help them avoid disaster. Why would that white tiger be so kind, bringing us to a cave to avoid disaster? Or is this part of a greater conspiracy? One of the pirates asked. Regardless, we need to keep walking. Unless you want to fight those monsters outside the cave. That is, another pirate said. Stop talking. We might as well explore the cave fully. Maybe that is where the white tiger stores its treasure. Who knows? We might be able to get something good out of it. The pirate crew was chattering among themselves when suddenly, they felt something emerge from deeper in the cave. In fact, they did not see anything. They just felt something come forward. The next second, everyone felt a chill. Their clothes billowed as a cold wind rushed up from deeper in the cave. The cold wind wasn't very strong. It was the type of wind that would only make tree leaves flutter gently, so it wasn't harmful to Han Sen's group. However, the wind made everyone feel weirded out. One of the pirates said, Weird. There is wind underground. Does that mean there is an exit? Fang Qingyu's eyes brightened, and he said, We're assuming that we've been in the black hole spider's stomach, right? If the ocean is the creature's stomach, there should be some organs that connect to it. Maybe accessing those organs can lead us to an exit. Shit. Does that mean the wind was a fart? A pirate exclaimed, turning green. Fang Qingyu's explanation made the others feel uncomfortable. But more than anything, they were just surprised. If this was true, they had a chance of escaping this hellish place alive. Escaping through the creature's intestines did not sound pleasant, but it would be better than dying. No matter how nasty the trip might be, life was more important. Everyone was full of hope. Their morale was given a big boost, and they followed the tiger at an eager pace. The tunnel twisted and corkscrewed, but in general, it was headed down. Some places were wide enough to let a plane fly through. Other places were so narrow that only one person could squeeze their way through at a time. As they traveled, the cool wind continued to blow over them from below. It was a very soft wind at first, but the deeper they went, the stronger it became. The stone walls on either side of them were smooth, which was undoubtedly a result of their exposure to the constant wind. It was like they had been caressed for 1 billion years. And then, they heard another wind-like sound. It came with the noise of distant, rumbling thunder. It was like an endless thunderstorm raging with the echoes of breaking space. The pirates felt as if their eardrums were about to pop. Fortunately, the wind wasn't strong enough to hurt anyone. It was just ominous. This is wrong. If this tunnel leads to the creature's guts, then it cannot keep farting this much. Maybe this black hole spider has an upset stomach? Please use your brains. Even if its stomach was upset, it would still need something to digest. That's what makes you feel sick. We have traveled all this way, and yet, we have only found dry rocks. There is nothing. Then what do you think this place is? If I knew, I wouldn't be talking to you about it. The pirates were arguing amongst themselves again. They weren't arguing for fun, but they clearly needed to blow off some steam. They were trying to alleviate the stress of the situation. Han Sun had known early on that these weren't the spider's guts, and in the presence of all the wind made him feel quite strange. If there was no exit down below, then the presence of wind was weird. Han Sun wanted to ask the white tiger, but the white tiger only continued to run forward. It ignored them, so getting information from that creature would be unlikely. Boom, boom, boom. The wind was coming up again. This time, it blew against them with greater strength. The force of the wind twisted the faces of the pirates into a variety of odd shapes. The skin of their faces flapped against their skulls with the wind. The Marquis class Fong Qingyu was almost blown away completely. His body lifted into the air, and Han Sun had to reach out and grab him to keep him from blowing away. The wind is getting stronger here. Should we keep going? The group drifted to a stop and looked at Han Senator. He was their leader. Han Sun was hesitating too. He didn't know much about the white tiger. Following the white tiger down into this random hole in the ground might not have been such a good idea, after all. If he could go back in time, he would not have let his people down there. As Han Sun pondered their current circumstances, the white tiger noticed they were no longer following. It turned around and rumbled at Han Sun, telling them to hurry. How about this? Well, the snakes haven't reached us yet, so this seems like a safe place to rest. You guys stay here while I scout ahead, Han Sun said to Fong Qingyu. Han Sun didn't care about the lives of the extreme king knights and pirates, but he did care about Gu Qingqing and Ningyu. Let us come with you. Gu Qingqing and Elysian Moon decided to follow, having no interest in staying behind. Don't leave me here. Ningyu jumped forward. She clung to Han Sen's legs, knowing that following Han Sun was better than staying put. Chapter 2584. Forming a stone, there was no getting rid of Ningyu, so Han Sun had to bring her with him. Gu Qingqing, Elysian Moon, Bower, and the little red bird also came along. Fong Qingyu decided to stay behind. The further into the depths they went, the scarier the wind became. Whenever the wind blew, not even Gu Qingqing and Elysian Moon could keep their balance. They didn't know why the wind was becoming so strong as they went deeper. For there to be so much wind, there had to be a windy exit. But when he looked down, what was seen was a hellish crack. No air could escape. Ningyu was scared, but she was unaffected. The little green sword she wielded kept the scary wind from getting close to her. I wonder what that little green sword is. Its abilities are too scary, Han Sun said with a sigh. As Han Sun was thinking, the white tiger suddenly disappeared. It was like it had just vanished into thin air. Why has the white tiger disappeared? Ningyu shouted in fear. Before Han Sun could answer, the white tiger was there again. It rumbled at Han Sun, and while Han Sun was still reeling from the shock, it disappeared again. Han Sun and the others moved carefully forward and found a hole in the ground. It dropped almost straight down, which was why it looked like the white tiger had disappeared. Due to the angle, Han Sun hadn't noticed the hole until they were right on top of it. They followed the white tiger down, and what they found at the bottom caught Han Sun by surprise. It was a jar-shaped cave. They came in from the side, but there was no other exit. That place was a dead end. The fact that the cave was a dead end wasn't what had caught their attention though. There was something in the cave. Han Sun didn't recognize the device. Most of it was obscured by the stone that covered it, and only about 1 foot of it could be seen. The device was purple like copper, and there were some strange symbols carved across it. It looked like the handle of something, but it wasn't like the grip of a sword or a knife. That was because this handle was only as thick as a couple of Han Sen's fingers. And even with the little they could see right now, the group knew that it was too long to be a normal handle. Boom! Han Sun and the others were still looking at that purple copper object that was buried by rocks when suddenly, a weird symbol shone with purple light. And right after, a scary storm came out of the purple object. Everyone was blown away by the wind. They bounced around the cave like rubber balls until the wind escaped through the passage they had used to enter. The respite afterward allowed them to get back on their feet. Han Sen and the little red bird had been left rather disheveled by the abrupt gust. The wind was far stronger than what they had experienced before. The wind was comparatively gentle when it entered the tunnel, but inside that cave, they were exposed to the full power of the gusts. What is this? How can it be so powerful? Han Sen looked at the purple copper object with shock. His eyes were glowing. Meow! The white tiger had walked over to stand next to the purple copper object. It used a paw to point at the item, and then it called to Han Sr. You mean you want me to get it out of there? Han Sen asked. Meow! The white tiger said with a nod. Gu Qingqing was staring intently at the purple copper object, and she made a guess. Maybe this thing can restrain the monster outside. Meow! The white tiger immediately nodded after hearing Gu Qingqing speak. Is such a thing possible? Han Sen thought, suddenly excited by the prospect. He had been trying to think of a way they could deal with the monster on the island, but he hadn't yet come up with anything. If this weapon could be used against their enemies, then their crisis would be resolved. And Han Sen would receive another treasure to boot. This was good. That strike was strong enough to cut a hole through an entire planet. But when the light faded, the rocks weren't even scratched. Everyone stared at the undamaged rocks with slack jaws. Chapter 2585. Purple Copper Jian Elysian Moon was as strong as a king class could be, but her full power attack hadn't even left a mark on the stones. The rock of that place was far sturdier than they could have imagined. Little Red Bird, Han Sen called. The little red bird understood what Han Sen wanted to see from it, so it shot out its phoenix fire to burn the rocks around the purple copper Jian. Surprisingly, it took half an hour of constant flames before the rocks even started to be affected. They began to turn red. If Han Sen tried to use the phoenix fire to melt the rocks into molten juice, God only knew how long that might take. Gu Qingqing looked at the burning rocks and said, The black hole spider has consumed many planets and stones. The spider must have eaten many high-class metals and special materials over the years, but its digestive system has failed to break down some of them. Anything that cannot be digested has come together to form these stones. If these rocks have withstood the digestive system of the deified black hole spider, it's easy to imagine how frighteningly strong this material might be. An ordinary deified won't have an easy time damaging these deified stones. Elysian Moon nodded to show agreement with what Gu Qingqing just said. The black hole spider was a deified xenogeniac that was at the butterfly rank. If a monster like the spider couldn't digest a material, then Han Sen's people wouldn't be able to break it down either. Fortunately, the little red bird could slowly burn its way through the stones. With effort and patience, a clump of steel could be ground into a needle. Clearly, those were the qualities that they needed here: effort and patience. As the little red bird was still spewing its blazing fires, another gale of wind erupted from the purple copper Jian. That wind scattered the phoenix fire everywhere, blowing it back across Han Sen and the others. Many pained screams erupted. The little red bird stopped spewing its phoenix fire, but it was too late. The flames had already left hair and eyebrows blackened and singed. They weren't badly injured though. They just looked a little haggard now. This purple copper Jian keeps releasing gales of wind. We can't burn through the rocks to get to it. Is there another way? Han Sen looked at Gu Qingqing and the others. Everyone swapped glances with each other, but no one could come up with any ideas. Then, we will try to take it one by one, Han Sen said. He summoned his Peacock King soul robe and walked up to the purple copper Jian. A rainbow light covered his hands as he tried to pull out the weapon. The Jian's mysterious patterns glowed with purple light, and then a scary storm flared from the purple copper Jian. It blew everyone away. Han Sen held onto the Jian. He lodged his feet against the rocks, and he tried to pull the purple copper Jian free. After trying his hardest, though, he couldn't get it to budge. If anything, the storms of the Jian became even stronger. It made Han Sen's feather robe and hair billow. Boom! Han Sen could no longer withstand that scary storm, so he was blown away. He bounced off a few rocks, but the wind was so strong that it continued to push him until he was thrown out of the cave. A while later, Han-sun flew back in. The storm in the cave had finally calmed down. Ningyu, give it a try. Maybe you'll have greater success, Han-sun said to Ningyu. Ningyu shook her head and retreated a step. She said, if you guys cannot do it, then I surely cannot. Just give it a shot. If you don't, I'll throw you to the snakes, Han-sun threatened. That storm wouldn't hurt anyone. It would toss them around, but it wouldn't kill them. Ningyu had the protection of her green sword. The storm didn't harm her. Perhaps she would be able to truly pull out the purple copper gem. Ningyu felt awful. She was so scared. But after Han-sun's threat, she reluctantly moved forward. Slowly, she placed her hands on the purple copper gem. Pang! Ningyu only had to touch the gem for the scary storm to return and blow her away. The power of the green sword didn't protect her this time. Ningyu rolled around for quite some time before coming to a stop. I told you I didn't want to try, and yet you forced me. Instead of getting up, Ningyu sat where she had landed, her hair a jumbled mess. She almost cried. Han-sun felt a headache coming on. No one there was able to pull out the gem. Normally, if a treasure seemed to be truly unobtainable, Han-sun would leave it be. But now, if he didn't take that purple copper gem, he wouldn't be able to take out the monsters. They would be trapped in this cave. That was a miserable thought. Dad, do you really want that purple copper gem? Bauer asked, tugging on Han-sun's sleeves. Yes, we need that purple copper gem. Do you have any ideas? Han-sun asked Bauer happily. Just pull it out, Bauer said. If we were able to pull it out, we wouldn't be standing here doing nothing, Elysian Moon said. Ningyu cried and said, yes, this thing is so weird. When you touch it, the wind comes and it cannot be repelled. Bauer blinked and jumped toward the purple copper gem. She reached out her hand to grip the gem's handle. As she did, everyone readied themselves to weather the storm. They didn't want to get blown away again. But after Bauer's little hand grabbed the handle, no storm came. Bauer held the purple copper gem tightly, and then pulled it out, as if she was unearthing a carrot. The purple copper gem hadn't shown any indication that it would move for anyone else, but it slid out easily in Bauer's grip. Ningyu and the others stared with wide eyes, unable to believe Bauer was able to do what she had just done. Bauer pulled out the 1-meter-long purple copper gem completely. It turned out to be taller than her. She delivered it to Han-sun and smiled. There you go, Dad. Bauer, you are so good. Dad will buy you ice cream later. Han-sun took the gem, a wide grin stretching his mouth. Strangely, when the gem was below the rocks, it would unleash storms whenever it was touched. Now that Han-sun was holding in his hand, there were no storms. Han-sun looked at the purple copper gem. It was the same as the one he viewed through his purple eye butterfly. It was 2 meters long, its blade was square, and it was crafted out of some sort of purple copper. It was quite heavy. On all 4 sides of the tool, there were strange symbols. But those weird symbols were different from the strange symbols on the handle. Han-sun tried putting his power into the purple copper gem to see if he could activate it. It was a surprisingly smooth process. After the power of the Dongxian Sutra entered the purple copper gem, its symbols lit up. Then, it glowed with purple light. Han-sun was pleased to see the light shining from the activated weapon. If he couldn't use it after retrieving it, that would be very frustrating. It seemed as if he had worried too much about it. The purple symbols on the gem lit up. Everyone in the cave could feel that the gem's true power wasn't actually wind. It didn't resemble the power that had been released from its handle, at least. Buzz! The gem's purple light grew stronger, then slowly transformed into purple flames. The purple copper gem became enshrouded in fire, and the intense purple fire followed Han-sun's hand and started to spread across his body. Chapter 2586. Purple copper gem's power. As Han-sun held the purple copper gem, his entire body was bathed in purple light. It was like an infinite number of purple stars were dancing around him. His whole body appeared blurry, as if his form was being obscured by purple clouds. Some strange power was at work, but Han-sun couldn't tell what it was. It felt so mysterious and difficult to understand. I wonder what this does, Han-sun wondered, intrigued. He swung the tool at the stone wall, and the purple starlight struck the rock. But the stone wall didn't move. Not a speck of damage was inflicted, and the purple stars were gone. Everyone looked closely at the stone wall. They thought that some sort of change would happen eventually, but after a while of waiting, the wall looked the same. Is it over? Ningyu asked in disbelief. I think it is over, Han Sun said as he looked at the purple copper Jian weirdly. He didn't know what all that had been about. The Jian had been brimming with power earlier, as it repeatedly blew them to hell. But now when he swung the Jian himself, nothing occurred. It was very strange. It must hold something other than destructive power. It should have another function, if we can figure it out. I wonder what element it is associated with, Gu Qingqing said with a frown. Han Sun thought the same thing. But he couldn't tell what element was associated with the purple copper Jian. Han Sun used his Dongxian area and the purple eye butterfly to examine it. He could see the universal cogwheels spinning within the Jian, but the universe cogwheels were different from anything that he had seen before. He couldn't discern what element they were. Han Sun tried to use the Jian's power a few times, but it didn't seem to do anything. Han Sun's attempts to attack the wall were failures, and when he brought out a book and swung the Jian against it, nothing happened there either. How weird. This Jian doesn't destroy anything. That is rare, Elysian Moon said. White Tiger, are you sure this Jian has the power to destroy the monsters out there? Han Sun asked the White Tiger. The White Tiger returned a vigorous nod, and then it growled encouragingly at Han Senator. It began to run back up through the tunnels, hurrying Han Sun to slay the monster. Han Sun had his doubts, but he had no choice. Taking the purple copper Jian with him, he began to run toward the surface. He would try to kill the monster with it. If he failed, he could escape and return underground with ease. When they saw the White Tiger coming, Fang Qingyu and the others were given a shock. They all scattered and tried to run away, but when they saw Han Sun behind the tiger, they breathed a sigh of relief. Han Sun, however, didn't have the time to spare talking to them. He allowed them to stay there while he continued to follow the White Tiger up through the tunnels. When they emerged, snakes were everywhere. Their numbers were unimaginable. Han Sun looked around, and he saw that the whole landmass had been swarmed by the snakes. There was a small part of the island that still had a few intact mushrooms, but it looked as if it would not be long before the snakes ate those too. There were already a few smaller snakes turning into monsters. The big monster was still gorging on mushrooms, and its body was starting to change. The black body suddenly looked like a rainbow crystal. The silk-like tentacles shone with refractive clarity. It looked very weird. Han Sun slashed the Jian at the snakes upon the ground, and it achieved nothing. When the purple light hit the snakes, it produced the same result as when it hit the stone wall. Nothing happened. Can this thing really deal with the big monster? Han Sun wondered. The White Tiger meowed loudly at Han Senator. It was hurrying him to fight the big monster. Han Sun had to try, so he gritted his teeth and summoned his Peacock King's soul robe. Then he flew toward the big monster. Before Han Sun reached the monster, it sensed his approach. It turned around and looked at Han Senator. Its body looked like a transparent crystal silkworm, and its hair-like tentacles were wriggling frantically. The tentacles formed together to create wings and a shell to protect the monster. From within its shielding, the monster kept a wary eye on the purple copper Jian in Han Sen's hand. Han Sun saw it and thought, "It looks like this monster is afraid of my purple copper Jian. Maybe the Jian will finally do something." Setting aside his hesitation, Han Sun used the Jian like he would a knife. He used Fang to slash the monster. The monster didn't use the tentacle shield to block the purple light. Instead, it flapped its wings to evade the strike completely. Han Sun smiled. Before, the monster had felt no need to dodge attacks from him or the little red bird. The enormous creature had simply absorbed their attacks with no ill effects. If it was now putting in the effort to evade the Jian, it must have been afraid of the purple light. "You are afraid? This will be easy," Han Sun said as he continued to swing the Jian. He used his under-the-sky knife skills, and several purple lights became knife silks that covered the whole monster. The monster was unable to dodge the purple light completely, and it raised its tentacle shield to block the portion of the light that it couldn't evade. When the tentacles came into contact with the purple light, It was like ice being thrown onto smoldering charcoal. The tentacles melted, and the purple light went clean through. When the light touched the monster, it left a deep wound behind. The monster gave a weird, high-pitched scream. Han-sun was surprised to find that where the monster had been hurt by the purple light, the tentacles couldn't come back to patch up the damage. It works! Han-sun was exultant. The purple light continued to shine as it headed for the monster. The purple light didn't deal damage to anything except the monster. The monster had once seemed invincible, but now it was defenseless before the purple copper jian. It shrieked as the purple light tore its body apart piece by piece. The monster no longer seemed interested in eating the mushrooms of the island. It turned around, intent on returning to the depths of the Black Sea. Han-sun teleported next to the beast, though, and he continued to strike it with the jian. The monster's form was corroded pretty badly, and as its body started to rot, dead tentacles were strewn over the ground. Through the corroded holes, Han-sun could catch a glimpse of the interior of the monster's body. There was a transparent crystal core inside. It looked like a soft, transparent version of a human head. Han-sun waved the jian, and the purple light struck the crystal core. The crystal core broke and oozed some sort of sticky liquid. Pang! When the crystal core broke, the monster's body exploded. The body and the tentacles liquefied instantly. Han-sun froze. He hadn't heard the hunting announcement. He didn't hear a single word about a xenogenic gene, nor anything about a beast's soul. The snakes never dropped any items either. Han-sun had thought they were a part of the big monster, and that killing the big monster would yield a xenogenic gene and beast soul. However, destroying the big monster had given him nothing. Chapter 2587. Weird changes. The big monster died, and afterward, the hordes of snakes departed like a receding tide. They all slithered back into the Black Sea, retreating far more quickly than they had attacked. In moments, they had completely disappeared. What were those things? Han-sun's heart was confused. He looked at the purple copper jian. The jian was so weird. It only seemed to be capable of affecting the monster he had defeated. There must have been some sort of problem with it. When Han-sun first saw the big monster surrounded by the smaller snakes, he had theorized that they were essentially the same being. If that was true, then the purple copper jian should have been able to damage the snakes as well as the larger monsters. But Han-sun had tried to strike the snakes many times, and they completely ignored the purple light. Something strange was going on. Han-sun looked at the white tiger. It was likely that only the tiger knew the secrets of the purple copper jian. But the white tiger had no interest in talking with Han-sun, in addition to the fact that it couldn't talk anyway. As this was going on, the white tiger began to chase the remaining snakes off of the island. And as it moved, it released a mushroom rain. When the mushroom spores landed on the snakes, mushrooms would grow on their bodies, sucking the moisture out of the snakes and leaving them as desiccated husks. Although he didn't completely understand what had happened, Han-sun knew that killing the big monster had been a good thing for them. Plus, he had gotten the weird purple copper jian out of the deal. Once they were rid of the snakes, Han-sun tried talking to the white tiger on numerous occasions. He wanted to know if there was a way out, but he also wanted to learn more about the purple copper jian. The white tiger would only ever meow twice and shake its head in response. Han-sun couldn't speak the tiger's language, but he understood that the tiger wasn't going to help. Does he not know, or does he just not want to spill the beans? Han-sun looked at the white tiger and frowned. After that though, the white tiger was never hostile toward them. It had no intention of harming them now. It would sometimes draw near and listen to whatever they were talking about. Han-sun noticed that the white tiger seemed to be spying on him in particular. It wasn't hostile, but the way its eyes followed him around was quite weird. Han-sun couldn't guess what the white tiger wanted though. The creature's gaze was neither hostile nor friendly. The way the tiger looked at Han-sun was familiar, but he couldn't tell what was familiar about it. Whatever. As long as he doesn't provoke me. Han-sun put the white tiger out of his mind, and after everything that had happened, he was exhausted. So he teleported back home. Holding Ji Yinran in his arms, he slept until morning. Arg! Before Han-sun woke up, he heard a scream. It shocked him out of his slumber. He looked at Ji Yanran and nervously said, "Darling, what happened? Is there an enemy?" You. Ji Yanran stammered, standing on the bed and pointing at Han Sun with her eyes wide. She said you 3 times, but she couldn't say anything more. What happened? Han Sun was shocked, so he quickly looked down at his body. Han Sun was wearing shorts, and he was topless. His muscles were like wet steel. His body was perfect. What's the problem with perfection? My body is still super fit. Did the fact that I've become even more handsome scare you? Han Sun posed before her, flexing cockily. Your head. Ji Yanran pointed at Han Sen's head with her eyes wide open. I told you before when we were in Black Hole Spider's belly, mushrooms grew on our heads. I removed it before I came back. Has it come back already? Han Sun asked, and then he touched his head. He froze, his hand still on his head. What is this? Han Sun felt something very soft under his fingers. Han Sun thought of something bad. He teleported in front of Ji Yanran's dressing table and looked at himself. Han Sun stared at his reflection, thunderstruck. There was no mushroom on his head, but instead, he was sporting purple fox ears. What the hell are these? Han Sun asked aloud with shock. Han Sun quickly tried to pull the ears off, but pain lanced through his head as he tugged at them. The purple ears seemed to be a part of him. Arg! You're back, Ji Yanran screamed. Her eyes were now focused lower on Han Sen's body. Han Sun was given another fright, and so he looked behind himself. There he saw a hairy purple tail. It looked very soft. What the hell is happening? Han Sun used his Dongxian area to check out his body. There was nothing wrong with him, as far as he could tell. It was like his ears and tail were now a part of his body. Ji Yanran's eyes opened wide, and she approached Han Senator. She looked frozen as she stared at him. Don't be afraid, my darling. This is just a small problem. Don't worry, I'll sort it out right now. Han Sun comforted Ji Yanran. It's so cute. Ji Yanran screamed happily. She hugged him and fondled his fox ears. Linger heard the commotion, and she rubbed her eyes and sat up. When she saw Han Sun, she looked so happy. She jumped atop Han Sen's back and grabbed one of his fox ears while she said, Daddy, it's so cute. Cute my ass. Han Sun felt humiliated. He put Linger in Ji Yanran's arms and turned his attention back to finding out what was going on. He had only just gone to sleep, and he had woken up this way. Han Sun used all sorts of powers to try to learn more about this issue, but no matter what method he tried, the fox ears and tail weren't a part of his body. There was no way to remove them. With his fitness and recovery powers, even if he tore them off by force, they would grow back. Honey, if you can't get rid of them, it's okay to keep them, Ji Yanran said with a smile. Yes, you can. Linger agreed fervently, holding her bottle as she looked at Han Senator. She kept nodding as she sipped from her bottle. Honey, you shouldn't hurt your body. Just keep it like this, Ji Yanran said. Yes, keep them. Linger followed with a nod. Your parents gave you this body, so you should cherish it. Yes, don't do anything stupid. No matter what you become, we will both love you. You should stop touching them. Yes, we love you. The two of them kept smiling as they tried to convince Han Sun, who was currently feeling as if he was in a very dire situation. The Jian, it must be the purple copper Jian. I was fine before, and this only happened when I retrieved this thing. Han Sun pulled the purple copper Jian from Destiny's tower. There was nothing weird about it though. The weapon rested quietly in Han Sen's hands. The symbols didn't react in any way, but Han Sun noticed something unusual. His fox ears and tail were the same purple color as the Jian. Chapter 2588. The purple copper Jian that cannot be gotten rid of. This must be happening because of the Jian. Han Sun gritted his teeth, but no matter how long he spent trying to find out what the precise problem was, he couldn't figure it out. That made Han Sun feel very unsettled. Most of Han Sen's discomfort was because of what had happened to Ningyu. The man had been ruined by the green sword that he found. What happened to him was scary, and Han Sun was now worried that the purple copper Jian would ruin him as well. Ningyu's personality and body had been wholly changed. He now seemed almost entirely like a woman. Han-sun was afraid he would end up transformed into a purple fox or something. He wasn't going to let that happen. Han-sun suddenly thought of the white tiger's face, and why it looked so familiar. He realized that he had recognized the expression. The white tiger looked at him in the same way he looked at Ningyu. That damn tiger knew something like this was going to happen. Han-sun felt so angry. Han-sun couldn't figure out a solution to this dilemma though. Han-sun then used his super god spirit body. He wanted to use the invincible powers of the super god spirit body to rid himself of any debilitating effects. After Han-sun used his super god spirit body, the fox ears and tail suddenly burned away. It made Han-sun let out a big sigh of relief. It is lucky I have a super god spirit body. I won't end up like Ningyu with this, Han-sun said, pounding his chest. When Ji Yanran and Linger saw that Han-sun's fox tail and ears were gone, they looked disappointed. It was like they had lost their favorite toy. Han-sun didn't care about their disappointment though. He didn't like looking weird. After deactivating the super god spirit body, he stroked his head and touched his behind. Everything was okay now. He felt much safer. But Han-sun's joy was short-lived. When he went for a walk with Linger later that day, the people in the streets started pointing at him. One girl giggled hysterically. A worried sensation began to gnaw at Han-sun's stomach. He touched his head, and he realized that the fox ears had suddenly grown back. The tail was back as well, lifting his clothes awkwardly. Han-sun's face changed. Linger, on the other hand, was happy. She sat on Han-sun's shoulder, playing with the ears with one in each hand. She kept rubbing them, looking delighted. Han-sun quickly flew to a place with no one around. And then he teleported home. He used his super god spirit body to rid himself of the queer physical attributes. Without hesitation, Han-sun immediately teleported back to the Geno universe. He threw the purple copper Jian into the Black Sea. Once he made sure that the purple copper Jian had sunk below the waves, he returned to the sanctuaries. Not long after, Han-sun noticed that the purple copper Jian was attached to the belt on his waist. How is that possible? Han-sun was shocked. He was now in the sanctuaries, and yet the purple copper Jian had somehow reappeared next to him. It was unbelievable. The purple copper Jian had only been with him for a matter of seconds, and already his ears and tail were growing again. Han-sun tried to get rid of the Jian many times. However, even if he placed the weapon on a planet inside the core area, he wouldn't be rid of it for long. In a short amount of time, it would reappear next to him. Now Han-sun knew he had suffered a misfortune that was similar to Ningyu's. A weird weapon was stuck with him, and there was nothing he could do to get rid of it. Now Han-sun regretted his recent choices. He shouldn't have taken the purple copper Jian. If he had known this was going to happen, he would have allowed Gu Qingcheng or Elysian Moon to take and wield it. It was more acceptable for a woman to have fox ears and a tail. It was too late to think of that now though. When they saw Han-sun, Gu Qingcheng and Elysian Moon tried their best not to laugh. They pretended there was nothing amiss, but Han-sun could sense that they were laughing incredibly hard on the inside. Can anyone tell me what this is? Han-sun asked, throwing the purple copper Jian in front of the white tiger. Meow, the white tiger said. It smiled with its moon-like eyes. Han-sun didn't speak the language of beasts, but he could tell it was laughing. Fuck you. Tell me now, what is this? Tell me how to get rid of it. If you don't, I'll skin you alive. Han-sun threatened the white tiger, grabbing it angrily. The white tiger mewed a little, but Han-sun didn't understand what it was trying to tell him. When Han-sun let the creature go, it hurriedly disappeared amidst the rocks. Han-sun couldn't do anything. He made many attempts to separate himself from the weapon, but he couldn't be free of it. But fortunately, the situation didn't become any worse. Aside from the fox ears on his head and the fox tail on his butt, there was nothing else wrong with him. The only silver lining in all this was that the head mushrooms were no longer an issue for Han Senator. When the fox tail and ears grew, the mushroom on his head didn't. The mushrooms are gone, but now I have the ears to contend with. What do these things think my brain is? A hotel? Han-sun was very angry, but he had no way of resolving the matter. Dad, you look good like this. Bauer tilted her head to look at Han Sr. I look good, my ass. Han-sun grumbled, but he had no choice but to accept it. He couldn't keep on using his super god spirit body every 5 minutes. You'll get used to it. That is what happened to me, Ningyu said quietly. Han Sun looked over at Ningyu's girly appearance. He felt a chill as he thought, no way. I must get rid of this crap. I can't end up like Ningyu. Despite Han Sun's determination, reality seemed set on disappointing him. The real world was cruel. Han Sun used many methods to try to free himself from the fox ears and tail, but nothing seemed to work. That day, Han Sun ransacked his mind for ideas on how to get rid of his fox-like features. Suddenly, he saw a strong shift in the fabric of space. A scary purple knife air broke through the mist and cut through the air around him. Teeth power, is that? Seeing that knife air, Han Sun was shocked. Only one other person could use teeth power in such a frightening way. A second after the display of knife air, Han Sun saw someone drop through the air to land on the island. That person was clad in purple armor. It was Isha, and as she landed in a crouch, she looked like a badass. Teacher. Han Sun was so happy. He never expected to see Isha there. There is no time. Follow me, Isha said coldly. Her face didn't show much in the way of emotion. But Han Sun knew that it must have taken a lot of effort for Isha to come all the way to get him. Han Sun could even see that Isha's armor was riddled with many cuts and dents. He was so touched. Isha was his teacher, but not many teachers would be willing to break into the black hole spider's belly to save their students. Han Sun quickly gathered his people to board the white whale. Then he followed Isha through the mist. Isha's expression remained impassive. Her knife unleashed teeth powers that spread through the endless mist. Isha was bringing Han Sun and the others with her. They followed the crack in space that teeth knife created. Chapter 2589. Race weapon. When everyone saw the skies of the systems of chaos, they all looked happy. Han Sun looked around as they emerged, but he couldn't see a black hole spider anywhere. The space crack they had just exited hung like a rift in the sky. Once they fully left the rift, a short knife flew out behind them. That knife was shaped like a dagger that was only 1 foot long. It was curved like a crescent moon and white like a fong. Space distorted around the small weapon as it moved. Isha was holding a curved scabbard. When the fong-like knife reached her, she slid it into the scabbard and attached the scabbard to her waist. The space crack lost the support of her teeth knife, and in seconds, it had collapsed and disappeared entirely. Master, what kind of knife is that? Why is its presence so familiar to me? Han Sun couldn't help but ask Isha. That moon-like teeth knife had teeth powers, and they certainly weren't ordinary teeth powers. This is the knife that belonged to my race's alpha. It is called break space teeth. If I hadn't had this knife to open the space tunnel to get to you, it would have been impossible for me to get into the black hole spider's belly to save you, Isha said, her face impassive. Teacher, how did you know we were inside the black hole spider's belly? Han Sun had been wondering this since she first appeared. Even though she had break space teeth, which could open a space tunnel, Isha would have needed to know where Han Sun was before she could jump to him. How could she have so accurately leaped into the black hole spider's stomach to save him? If she had made the tiniest mistake, such as opening a space tunnel inside the gruesome flesh of the black hole spider and alerting the gross fiend, Isha would have probably met a grisly end. She wouldn't have been saving anybody. While no one else knows of your return, let us head to Sky Palace, Isha said simply. She didn't answer Han Sun's question. If Isha wasn't going to answer, then there was no point in Han Sun asking her again. He continued to follow Isha as she traveled through the systems of chaos. With Isha there, leading the way, their path was much safer. Han Sun had unlocked the 9th tier of his Blood Pulse Sutra during his time inside the black hole spider's belly. The story of genes had been leveled up too. It was just as Han Sun expected. As the story of Gene's area increased, the strength of his body increased along with it. His connection with the black crystal armor had also become clearer and more defined. If I become half deified, will I be able to manually activate the black crystal armor? Han Sun wondered. The white tiger followed them out. It flew along with them, not looking as if it wanted to leave. It was weird. When they left the black hole spider's belly, the mushrooms on their heads died and didn't grow back. But the white tiger's head still had a mushroom on it, and that mushroom showed no signs of dying. Everyone else, however, was quite pleased to see their mushrooms shrivel and fall away. It was as if a weight had been lifted off their shoulders as a grand crisis was resolved. But Isha looked at the white tiger and said, "Inside the black hole spider's belly, nothing below the rank of deified can survive. If you all survived this long, you should be thanking the mushrooms you were given." Han Sun and the others were shocked. They had viewed their mushrooms as something of a curse. They had never realized that the mushrooms were protecting them. They looked at Isha with a gaze of disbelief. "You think it's that easy to live inside the black hole spider's belly?" Isha asked sternly. "There are scary powers in there that you couldn't even see. The powers in that place are like viruses that can invade the bodies of anything. They break down entire creatures into nothing but raw nutrients to feed the black hole spider. Without a deified body, it is impossible to withstand or even notice those powers before it is too late. Even with a deified body, survival is not guaranteed. The mushrooms that the big white cat placed on your heads are the only reason you guys were able to survive there for the duration you did." When Han Sun heard Isha say this, he suddenly had a flashback to the information he discovered inside the broken battleship. He thought to himself, when that woman conducted the tests that we saw, was it to allow the white cat to survive there? If what Isha says is true, then it seems pretty likely. The mushroom on the white cat was probably invented by that woman. It was a vaccine to resist the viruses that would have otherwise ravaged the white tiger's body. We were saved by it. Han Sun wasn't sure if vaccine was the right word to describe a mushroom with magical healing powers, but he decided to go with it. "So, ever since we first arrived in that place, the white tiger was sustaining our lives. Without it, even if I survived, everyone else would have died. But how did that woman get inside the black hole spider's belly in the first place? And why did she leave by herself, leaving the white tiger behind?" Han Sun really wanted to find that woman and ask her, but he had no clue where she might be found. Ever since they parted ways in Two World Mountains, he never heard from her again. "What is up with you?" Isha asked, looking at Han Sen's head. Bao was sitting on Han Sen's shoulders, playing idly with Han Sen's fox ears. She kept squeezing them. She seemed to be having a lot of fun with them. Han Sun told Isha about what had happened in the tunnels under the island. And when Isha heard what he said, she looked stunned. "Let me see the jian." Han Sun brought out the purple copper jian to show Isha. Isha didn't take it into her hands, but after a while, she nodded and said, "That's it. That is the fox's race weapon." "It's a race weapon?" Han Sun didn't understand. He had never heard that term before. Isha sighed and said, "Right now not many know about race weapons. In ancient times, all the races that lit up a Geno lantern were able to make a gene weapon with the fire of the lantern. That race weapon would be fused with the genes of the race that forged it. It would gain incredible power and become a very special weapon. Some strong race weapons are like true god-level deified weapons. They might even be stronger. But each gene lantern can only ever forge one race weapon. The first person that lights up the lantern receives the weapon. If they light up the gene lantern again, they won't get another. Stealing a race weapon is the only way to get a second one. So right now not many creatures know about race weapons. Even if they encountered one, most people would just think it was a powerful deified weapon." After a brief pause, Isha said, "The fox's race weapon is called 9-Spin Destiny Mirror, but from what I know, it was a race weapon that the foxes stole. It didn't originally belong to them. I have heard that their real race weapon, the one they received when they lit their lantern, is the purple copper jian. I've never seen it myself, but I think that might be it." Han Sun was thrilled to hear that, because the 9-Spin Destiny Mirror was also in his hands. He just didn't know how to use the 9-Spin Destiny Mirror. He heard from Fox Queen that the 9-Spin Destiny Mirror only worked for foxes who became deified. He didn't know if that was the truth. "Teacher, is there a way to remove this ailment of mine?" Han Sun looked at Isha, his eyes full of hope. She knew where the purple copper jian came from, so she must have known a way to fix it. Chapter 2590. Fighting Menglai race weapons are deified as soon as they are created, Isha said, shaking her head. They are smarter than the average deified weapon. They are stronger too. If the weapon was used by a creature from the race that created it, the weapon would be incredibly beneficial to them. There wouldn't be any such side effects. If it was activated by someone of another race, however, they would adopt the traits and powers of the race the weapon belongs to. Their bodies would be invaded by the race's genes, which would turn them into something weird. Unless you gain enough power to overwhelm the race weapon, you won't be able to hold off its effects. Is there no other way? Hansen asked with depression. Well, I can't say with certainty that there isn't some way to be rid of its influence. If there was an elite that could use force to suppress the power of the race weapon and erase the fox genes within it, perhaps your genes could be placed in the weapon instead. You could probably get rid of the gene weapon's side effects that way. It is like the fox's 9-spin destiny mirror. A scary fox elite erased the original genes inside the mirror and replaced them with his own. That way, it became a race weapon of the fox. Isha paused and said, but the genes of the foxes are very good. I have heard that when they lit up their gene lantern, their ranking was quite high. This purple copper gen's power might indeed be true god class. Unless you can find a true god class elite that is willing to spend some energy wanting to help you, there is no other way. Does that mean I'm done for? Hansen looked as if he was going to cry. He didn't have a true god deified to help him. He didn't know of any to begin with. Even if he did, there was no reason for someone else to expend so much effort erasing the fox genes inside the purple copper gen on his behalf. You look quite good the way you are, Isha said. Then she continued flying. It took a while for Hansen to wake up from his disheartened daze. Hansen equipped glasses to hide his face, then used the item to inspect Isha's genes. The numbers on the display kept cycling. It took a while for her details to be produced. The rebate wasn't a very rich race, but Isha's gene potential was at 8 stars. If the potential is 8 stars, then that means she can become a butterfly. If she wants to become a true god, a grand opportunity will need to come her way and offer her a boost. It is a shame my Blood Pulse Sutra is only king class right now. I can't boost the genes of a deified. If I could, I'd definitely help Isha perfect her genes. That way, she would have a greater chance of becoming a true god, Hansen thought to himself. Before, Hansen had tried to use the power of the Blood Pulse Sutra on the little red bird. But it didn't work. His king-class Blood Pulse Sutra was unable to push the self-cogwheel of a deified being. Hansen looked at the white tiger. He noticed that its potential was the same as the small crocodile god. It was 9 stars. Hansen asked Isha to look at Ningyu's little green sword. She was unable to determine what sort of weapon it was, but judging from what had happened to him, it was likely a race weapon. Which race exactly? She didn't know. The white whale had almost fully recovered. Hansen invited Isha to ride inside the white whale, and it was an offer she didn't refuse. The group rode inside the white whale for the remainder of their journey to Sky Palace. They didn't see elites from any other races as they traveled through the systems of chaos. They often encountered space xenogenics, though, and luckily, Isha was there to help them in such engagements. With Hansen and the little red bird's deified powers, they were in no danger. That white tiger slept inside the ship day and night. It didn't lend them any power, or look as if it was willing to lift a finger to help out. The white whale was flying forward as it usually did when suddenly, a group of ships appeared. The sight made Hansen and the others feel a chill. Spring rain, Hansen said when he recognized the symbols on the battleships. It was spring rain, the group of agents that Miss Mirror commanded. Of course, when those battleships surrounded the white whale, a man and a woman came out of the lead ship. The woman was Miss Mirror. The man was the 4th uncle Meng Lai. We just exited the black hole spider not too long ago. Why are they already here? Hansen was shocked. Hansen, do you want to come with us peacefully? Or are we going to have to drag you back? Meng Lai asked with a laugh. Hansen remained silent. Although they had 3 deifieds in their midst for combat, they were each of the lowest class. They were primitive deifieds. Miss Mirror was a primitive deified, but she had been deified for longer. Her powers were weird, and she would be hard to deal with. Menglai could certainly be a transmutation deified. Even Lando, who became deified, had been unable to defeat him. Fighting him would be harder than dealing with Miss Mirror. But Han Sen had no choice now. He put on his Peacock King Soul robe, equipped his 6-core snake bow, and exited alongside the little red bird. Isha came out as well. She quietly stood next to Han Sr. Miss Mirror looked at Isha and said, "Knife Queen, the rebate have always sided with the Extreme King. You aren't going to destroy our long-standing relationship merely for Han Sen, are you?" "The rebate already has an alliance with Sky Palace," Isha said flatly. "I'm willing to be friendly with the Extreme King, but if you people keep trying to get in my way, then I have no other choice." When Han Sen first went on the run, Isha was slow to act because she was dealing with the politics of the rebate. She couldn't get the whole of the rebate involved simply to save Han Sr. Now though, the rebate had entered an alliance with Sky Palace. They had the protection of Sky Palace. It would be troublesome for the Extreme King to dare touch them. "Knife Queen, you need to rethink this. Is all of this worth it? Is it worth betraying us on behalf of your student? You know how traitors to the Extreme King are dealt with." Menglai frowned. "If I cannot protect my student, then what use is there for the rebate to even exist?" Isha growled. "I would like to see what benefits Sky Palace offered that have given you the courage to flat out deny the will of the Extreme King." Miss Mirror's face was hard as she raised her hand and moved to attack Isha. Isha didn't move, but she pulled out her short-teeth knife to attack Miss Mirror. Menglai sighed. His body turned to gold, and then he pressed his hands down on the lion mount he rode upon. The gold color dyed the lion. The next second, Menglai waved his hand. The golden lion rose, turning into a golden knife that resembled the head of a lion. "I didn't want to kill you, but you just won't stay put." Menglai lifted the knife that looked like the head of a lion and approached Han Senator. Each step he took was like he was crushing the whole world. It felt like the whole galaxy had become smaller in his presence. Menglai was coming like a golden god. The little red bird shrieked at him as a phoenix fire blazed across it. It became a beautiful fire burning next to Han Sen, and it unleashed a scary sea of flames. Chapter 2591 Bad Fight. The sky was full of fire, and it was all headed for Menglai. Menglai swung his knife, and the sea of fire parted like it had been cut with a pair of scissors. The fire fell away to either side of the man and faded. A cold, golden knife light suddenly flew toward the little red bird. If the little red bird hadn't dodged the attack in time, it would have been cut in half. Menglai is so powerful. His gold soldier body is very strong. Han Sen couldn't help but compliment his opponent. Menglai was a transmutation deified, and when he turned another deified xenogeneic into a soldier, his strength had grown. A primitive deified would have a hard time taking him down. Han Sen's body shone with rainbow light. Between his fingers, he held an arrow that was infused with rainbow light. He pulled back the string of the 6-core snake bow and fired the arrow at Menglai. The moment the rainbow light arrow left Han Sen's fingers, it disappeared. When it appeared again, Menglai's golden lion head knife hit the arrow of rainbow light. It broke the light arrow with ease, which shocked Han. Senator Menglai had somehow seen the arrow as it teleported. He had broken the arrow easily. A power like that was terrifying. Transmutation class powers are that scary? Then how strong must a true god be? Han Sen sighed. Menglai came slashing at Han Sen like a golden god spirit that was dominating the whole sky. That knife consumed all of space. It made Han Sen feel as if he couldn't dodge. If Han Sen practiced the real god's wander, he could teleport anywhere he wished to. He could have teleported far away from that golden knife light. But with his current skills, such techniques were beyond him. His eyes were like lightning as he pulled out his purple copper jian. He used a stance that would allow him to blow up the sky. Pang! A knife silk was broken by the scary golden god light. Han Sen and the purple copper jian flew away. The purple copper jian shook violently, and Han Sen's arms were almost cut off. The muscles in his hands were delivered a deep laceration, and his bones could be seen through the wound. "Ha! You blocked my knife and didn't shatter. That is quite a good deified weapon. How many deified weapons do you possess? Meng Lai looked at the purple copper jian in Han Sen's hand with complete surprise. Han Sen didn't answer him. He frowned and looked at the purple copper jian. Does this guy's power only work against enemies in the black hole spider's stomach? The purple copper jian was a race weapon. It was as good as a weapon of the true god rank. But now, the purple copper jian seemed a little underwhelming. Han Sen expected this though. He hadn't yet figured out what sort of power the purple copper jian possessed, so its real power hadn't yet been displayed. In addition, Han Sen's power was simply too weak. He couldn't use the jian's full power to block Meng Lai's strike, and it didn't even look like the fourth uncle had been trying all that hard. Han Sen, you should know that my first strike was just me going easy on you. If you still don't understand, then the next attack won't be so gentle, Meng Lai said, word by word. As he approached Han Senator, everything that existed trembled under the booming of his voice. Even Han Sen's body shook a little. Han Sen wasn't shaking, because he was afraid though. It was his natural reaction to facing a strong enemy. He was so hyped in the middle of combat, that it released all of his hidden power, building more and more energy within him. This was the biggest fight he'd had in years, and his only choice was to win. Losing wasn't an option. If he lost, then all the people following him would be killed too. Han Sen looked at Meng Lai, who had come forward like a god. His purple-eyed butterfly spun like mad. Before Meng Lai attacked again, Glasses was bringing up the man's test results. Target, Extreme King Male. Gene age calculation. 12,300 years gene level. Transmutation deified gene potential. 8 stars. Han Sen was shocked. It seemed as if the gene potential level was trickier than he had expected. Even an Extreme King transmutation deified only had 8 stars. The stars of a lower race were bound to be lower. So, Isha's 8 stars were actually quite impressive. Right now though, Han Sen didn't care how many stars Meng Lai had. The man's potential wasn't something that mattered right now. At the moment, Meng Lai was simply a transmutation deified enemy that he had to get rid of. Target, Lion Male. Gene age calculation. 163,000 years gene level. Primitive deified gene potential. 6 stars. This was the data of the deified xenogeneic that had been turned into a knife that resembled the head of a gold lion. Its data didn't mean anything though. Under the influence of Meng Lai's gold soldier body, the xenogeneic had been transformed into a knife and gained more power than ever before. Beastie. Another strike was on its way. The gold sword light tore through the universe, effortlessly cutting through the fabric of space. Han Sen's eyes flashed red, and his whole body turned red as well. The moment the golden knife light landed, it disappeared. Meng Lai frowned. He didn't look around though. He knew exactly where Han Sen was. He used his left hand to gouge his own eye. Pang! Meng Lai's eye exploded. It was a self-inflicted blow, and a stream of golden, godlike blood gushed out. Han Sen fell out with it. Han Sen had made use of his blood-eye evil god's power to fire himself into Meng Lai's eye. He hadn't realized that Meng Lai would be so brutally efficient. He was happy to poke and obliterate his eye, which sent Han Sen rolling out. Han Sen, spare me these tricks. They won't work on the likes of me. Meng Lai's eye was still bleeding golden blood, but the flow of blood had been reduced dramatically. The wound wasn't healed, however, which prevented Han Sen from re-entering the eye with his blood-eye evil god. He had been blinded, but Meng Lai was still able to watch Han Senator. It was like he could see every move that Han Sen made. He moved the gold lion head knife, and the gold knife light that could destroy the most ancient things surged toward Han Senator. It was so suppressive. It was like the whole galaxy was going to snap. The Peacock King robe had its wings open. A rainbow substance chain surrounded Han Senator. It connected with the purple copper jian, which Han Sen then used as an arrow with the 6-core snake bow. Facing this scary gold knife light, Han Sen pulled back the string of the 6-core snake bow. He fired the purple copper jian. The purple copper jian disappeared in a hazy rainbow light. When it reappeared, it slammed into the scary gold knife light. Han Sen wasn't worried about the purple copper jian breaking. Race weapons weren't that easy to break after all. And even if it did break, Han Sen wouldn't be very upset about that. He didn't want his new ears or tail anyway. Pang! The purple copper Jian and the gold god light collided. It was like a sun had just exploded. It created a scary shockwave that destroyed everything around them. Han Sen watched that grand explosion. The purple copper Jian came back, spinning like a flaming wheel. Han Sen grabbed it, and he marveled at how there wasn't a single scratch on it. Meng Lai stared at the purple copper Jian, his eyes blank with shock. He had used so much power that time. But even so, that orange-looking purple copper Jian had blown up his knife light without incurring any damage. That was unbelievable. Is this another deified weapon like the shield of the Medusa's gaze? Meng Lai looked at Han Sen's purple copper Jian. Han Sen looked at his mint-condition purple copper Jian with joy. I don't know what the true power of the purple copper Jian is, but it seems pretty good. It can block Meng Lai's knife lights. As Han Sen thought this, he put the purple copper Jian back against the string of the 6-core snake bow and aimed at Meng Lai. Chapter 2592 Charming Gods Jian Han Sen fired the purple copper Jian like an arrow once more. This time, he put even more power into it. The moment the Jian left the string of the 6-core snake bow, it teleported and disappeared. Teleportation won't work against me unless you can teleport without causing a ripple in the fabric of space, Meng Lai said coldly. And then, he reached his hand out into the air. The purple copper Jian emerged from space and appeared right where Meng Lai had placed his hand. He grabbed it. This time, Meng Lai didn't use the lion head knife to try to break it. He used his hand to clutch the purple copper Jian. He wanted to hold it and get a better look at what sort of deified weapon it was. But when Meng Lai's hand was just about to close around the purple copper Jian, the purple copper Jian managed to leave its flight path and vanish from Meng Lai's vision once more. When Meng Lai saw the purple copper Jian again, the weapon was protruding from his chest. That arrow wasn't bad, Meng Lai said, completely unconcerned about the blow that had landed on him. Based on how Han Sen's arrow interacted with his gold knife light, Meng Lai was confident that it wouldn't damage his gold soldier body. But after he finished talking, Meng Lai's face changed. He looked down and saw that the purple copper Jian had perforated his heart. Golden god blood slowly dribbled out of his body. How is that possible? Meng Lai couldn't believe his eyes. It shouldn't be possible to hurt his gold soldier body with an ordinary deified weapon. And on top of that, Han Sen was only king class. Even if Han Sen used a deified weapon, he shouldn't have been able to break Meng Lai's gold soldier body. The pain that stemmed from the wound in his chest told the extreme king that his injury was real, not some sort of illusion. Unless a possibility crossed Meng Lai's mind. His eyelids flickered. Instead of trying to fight back, he grabbed the handle of the purple copper Jian. Unless this is a butterfly deified weapon. And that was how he was able to break my gold soldier body. Meng Lai's eyes burned brightly. He pulled the purple copper Jian out of his chest. When the purple copper Jian slid free, the wound in his chest healed. He recovered swiftly and no mark remained. When Han Sen watched the purple copper Jian puncture Meng Lai's heart, he was happy. But his optimism was short-lived, and watching this next bit made him frown. He had to marvel at just how strong these deified elites really were. Thank you for giving me a powerful deified weapon. If you are being this generous, how about you give me the shield of the Medusa's gaze too? Meng Lai held the purple copper Jian and erupted with a gold god light. Waves of gold energy enveloped the purple copper Jian, dyeing the purple copper Jian a gold color. The gold soldier king body could turn deified beings into gold weapons. The skill worked on deified weapons too. It couldn't change the element of deified weapons, but Meng Lai was able to claim and use many different kinds of deified weapons. As the purple copper Jian was turning gold, Meng Lai's face suddenly changed. He saw that the purple copper Jian was no longer changing. Instead, it was reverting to purple. The mysterious engravings upon the Jian suddenly lit up and blasted Meng Lai's hand away. How is that possible? Is this a true god weapon? Meng Lai looked at his hand. The portion of his flesh that had touched the purple copper Jian was no longer gleaming gold. It was just his skin. A deified weapon, which no one was controlling, had destroyed a section of his gold soldier power. It was unbelievable. Meng Lai raised his head. His fiery eyes were locked on the purple copper jian in Han Sen's hand. He smiled and said, "A true god weapon. It is a true god weapon. Han Sen, you are a man of great luck. You have 2 true god weapons." Many deified elites would weep and beg for just one. You are only a king, and yet you have 2. If you know that I have great luck, why must you insist on troubling me all the time? Isn't what you're doing against the will of the gods? Han Sen asked coldly as he lifted the purple copper jian. Meng Lai laughed. The gold god light was bright in his hands. He spread his gold power back over the hand whose light had been extinguished, laughed and said, "The path to evolution has us all fighting against the sky. Everyone's evolution is built on the broken bones of their opponents. What you eat and what you use comes from the creatures of lesser fortunate universal beings. If you don't try to fight your way higher, you will be shit on the road for other creatures to consume. If things were not like that, why would I be afraid of the things that hold me back? You have good luck. In that case, I will steal your luck for my benefit. With these 2 true god weapons, the Extreme King will grow even more powerful in the future. That is my luck, and the Extreme King's luck." Meng Lai continued to cast his gold god light. The entire system turned to gold. Even the system rang with a godly hymn, and the world kept trembling without reprieve. It was like the world was answering what he had just said. Although Han Sen was Meng Lai's enemy, he had to admit that the man was quite right. In that universe, a blade of grass, a log of wood, a stone, a drop of water, all of them held life. Whether you were an extreme king or a human, if you wanted to live, you would have to do it by standing on the blood and bones of others. If success was merely a matter of luck, then fighting to better yourself would be pointless. You might as well dig a hole and bury yourself. You are right. Han Sen's eyes looked clear. The purple copper jian was on the 6-core snake bow again. Han Sen pushed his jade skin, blood pulse sutra, and the Peacock King's soul robe to the max. The flesh of Han Sen's whole body seemed to vibrate with strength. Blood surged and roared through his vessels, and his heart was like a generator that could not stop spinning. His body began to swell, and he looked very excited. The feather robe gleamed with rainbow light, which spread to cover the purple copper jian. The purple copper jian's marks seemed to brighten under its touch. It was like they were turning into mysterious symbols of light that surrounded the purple copper jian. Even the ears on Han Sen's head and the tail on his back glowed with a purple light. Seeing Han Sen and the purple copper jian, Meng Lai's excitement was through the roof. He shouted, "Now I understand. I finally understand. That weapon belongs to the foxes. It is Cupid's jian. No wonder it was able to damage my gold soldier body." Cupid's jian? What on earth? Han Sen thought that name was so weird. Meng Lai laughed and said, "Cupid's jian is also called the charming god's jian. I thought it was destroyed when the Fox Elder went to the Geno Hall. I cannot believe it still exists, and it is now in your possession. God is helping the Extreme King on this day. With the charming god Jian, the reputation of the Extreme King will only increase." Meng Lai was so excited. He looked at the purple copper Jian with his blinded eye and summoned gold light. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.